Okay, shh. Listen to this. This is the tape I found downstairs.
This is Professor Raymond Nogan, Department of Ancient History, log entry number 2. I believe I have made a significant find.
Death has come to your little town, Sheriff.
Don't you blame the movies! Movies don't create psychos! Movies make psychos more creative!
We have such sights to show you.
Join us! Join us! Who's laughing now? I'm gonna hurt you. You didn't flinch me, see? I said, I'm not gonna hurt you. I'm just gonna bash your brains.
Good evening, campers, dreamers, and babysitters. And yes, after a minor hiatus, we have returned with a new episode of SplatterCast. And of course, I am here with you. This is Dylan Newell, and we have...
I'm Luke Janesco.
Of course, yes, we're a little out of the swing of things. I thought that went pretty well, though. Yeah. Boy... It's been a little bit. We have been busy on the channel. So if you're a SplatterCast purist and you only listen to these episodes, number one, what are you doing? We got a whole list of content on this channel, all kinds of things for you. I know we haven't been updating the audio portions like we said we were going to get on this year, but we're working on it. We're going to get there. I think Luke and I are going to have to probably pull double duty on that and get that knocked out at some point. But if you're here, hopefully you've been watching a lot of the content we've been putting out, because although we haven't done a main show in probably about 2 months, we've got a lot of great stuff out there. We've been really knocking it out of the park with interviews, screeners. You know, when opportunity arises, you got to take it. So we're kind of looking at this as our almost town hall, in a sense of just being like, hey, it's been a minute. Let's take a moment and reflect on what we have been up to since we haven't done an episode of SplatterCast.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride, to say the least here, because when we got into this, you know, it was, let's do a podcast every 2 weeks, and that was going to be our main priority. That was going to be the thing that we really doubled down on, and then all the other content was just going to flow and be kind of, you know, surrounding the main podcast, and that's really what it was going to be. And then eventually we figured our trajectory would be, you know, maybe we'll get an interview, maybe we'll get screeners. You know, that was kind of a down the line goal. And then the ball just started rolling, especially when we got to Splatterthon. It really just started taking off, and we got opportunity after opportunity, and it was just like, well, you know, we can't pass this up. We got to jump on it while this opportunity exists. And then, you know, we started balancing it, and then we were like, well, you know, we're going to take the podcast down to once a month. And, you know, I think I think our anticipation was, oh, well, the first few months of 2023 are, you know, going to be pretty slow. And boy, were we wrong. Skinamarink came out, Outwaters came out, and then that really kicked us into I think a completely different gear. And then that was like, you know, we got a couple of amazing interviews and some screeners. So we've been really covering so much current stuff that the podcast was like, you know, we had to keep putting it off a week and then put it off another week. And then it was like, okay, well, we'll just go next month. And then, you know, so the ball just kept rolling, but we're here now, and we are back on track with this podcast.
Absolutely. And let's not forget to mention that as of the release date of this is very strategically planned, we have officially, as of today, hit our 1 year mark of when we started posting videos on this channel. So we've done it. We committed. We did a year. After this video, you're not going to hear from us for a long time. So there just as we always like to do. But
back
no,
in the depths.
This was definitely something that I don't know. Was there any doubt in your mind, Luke, that we'd hit this again? Because, you know, we've done this, like we like to say, for a few years before. You know, I think that this was our first real, we're going to commit hard as hell and we're going to do it kind of thing. And so were you kind of like surprised at all that we're here? Are you sitting here today kind of surprised that we've made it a year with consistently posting content?
Well, okay. So from the outlook that we started with from a year ago, I would have been like, okay, yeah, we're gonna do this. Where we're focusing mainly on the podcast because from my perspective was like, where we were sitting, in terms of life events that were already happening or going to be coming. It was like, well, we could easily make time every 2 weeks to sit down and talk about, whatever movie because we enjoy it and that's what it's gonna be. If you were to take me back to that day and said, this is all the things that are gonna be in front of you, I would have said there's no way we were going to stick with consistency and be able to achieve everything that we have within that year. So when we started this, very different goals. I would have said very sustainable. We could do it. If you would have told me everything that we have achieved, I would have been like, there's no way we're going to get all that done within a year. So,
Yeah.
I had faith, but, I had no idea of what was going to unfold for the next, 12 months ahead of us.
Yeah, and I mean, like, a big thing for me on this too was just like, we did this before with By Admission where we were like, let's cover all the new releases, and I had you going to see every fucking movie that came out, and it was getting exhausting. I never could have imagined that we would be riding into 2022, into the year that we had in horror, where, for a while there, it was just like every week there was something to cover.
Yes.
And then, we kind of rolled into that. So unfortunately, which I don't think is as unfortunate now because we've actually got a good handle on it. Before we were kind of posting reviews into the void where we get like 5 people maybe watch it and that was it. Now we have a lot of communication. We've got a lot of people subscribing and a lot of people, just really welcoming us into the community. It feels like we actually have a voice. So it's one of those things where it's like, I had no idea that that's what we were coming into. So it really was kind of a blessing that we kind of started this when we did, because we really rolled into the best possible year with things like, we knew Halloween Ends was going to be controversial for us. We knew we had a Scream coming up, but Lord, we didn't know about things like Skinamarink. We didn't know about things like, Outwaters this year, but we really didn't even anticipate seeing Terrifier 2. And then something like that being so big for us. And then, Jeepers Creepers was coming around the corner and I got to see that. And that really was one of our first big videos to blow up. So it was like, Jesus, like we had no idea that any of this stuff was going to hit, and it was nuts.
And it's just like looking back on that year, I've talked about it several different times, and the double feature of Terrifier 2 and then going to watch Hellraiser, absolutely phenomenal. Those are things that were so hectic at the time, but you look back as such a fond memory of, being able to look at that and say, hey, we pulled that off, in a timely manner. It was a tall order, but we got through it. And those are things that are just absolutely so fun. Even covering Rob Zombie's The Munsters, where it was just like,
yeah,
I don't know how this is going to go, but I will always remember sitting down and, as I said, a moment of clarity and saying, well, this may not be for me. And that, that review being a little controversial in itself. And then, of course, Prey. Come on.
Prey. That was one of our
earliest
videos too. It was our 4th video. I'm looking at it right now. Teaser trailer discussion, because I had gotten I had seen the leak. I recorded it on my phone and I sent it to you. So before it was able to take down, I don't know if that's going to get me in trouble or not. I don't think it matters now. But it was one of those things where it was like, hey, we can talk about this. And I was still rocking my laptop. This is before I got the Beast early this year or late last year, where it was one of those things where it was like, I tried to process that thing for like 2 days. It took me to get that video out. And by the time I got the video out, the full trailer had come out. But yeah, that was a big deal for us. That was like one of those things where we're like, not only were we excited for this movie, but like we got to see the trailer just a teensy bit early. And, we had a lot to say. And obviously we talked for 27 minutes on that alone. So yeah.
And then, not even necessarily the new things, but being able to go back and, things like Sinister and uncovering Spawn and how bad of a film that was, but how much potential it could have. Tremors 2, all these different things that
Darkman.
Yeah. All this stuff that has just been like, you watch it and you have a memory of it, but you haven't had a reason to go back and revisit it. And I think the podcast is for one of many great reasons, but to be able to go back and have an excuse to watch these films. And we both have a kind of onslaught of what's going to be coming. We have that lineup coming, for the rest of the year for the most part. And even I'm excited to go back and revisit some of the things that I haven't seen in a minute. So, I mean, just a podcast in itself, I think, is a great excuse to just go back and, watch these films that we love.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I'm just feeling nostalgic as I'm whipping through our back catalog here, looking at things like, seeing what performed well at the time and what has just performed. Like I wasn't even paying attention to some of this stuff way back here because like you're always focused on what's next now with the amount of content we're putting out. But like some of you have gone back and looked at our older videos. We appreciate that. I mean, we had December to Dismember. Not only did we talk about Splatterthon, but December to Dismember was an undertaking. Definitely put you through the ringer on that one by going through all the Silent Night, Deadly Night films. Definitely probably going to scale back on franchises as far as covering things with so many entries. We're definitely going to cover franchises, but I think we're going to be a bit more strategic about it as we go along here. That's the plan, at least. We'll see.
But being able to, it was a tall order to go back and watch Silent Night, Deadly Night, all of which I had not seen, I believe, up until that point. So being able to kind of go in and close the book in a sense on a big blind spot in terms of a horror franchise that I never had the chance to sit down and watch. And even though a lot of them were misses in my book, I can, officially say, the Silent Night, Deadly Night, I can give a full appraisal to, and had that excuse to go watch it. And even this December to Dismember was so much fun in itself. I mean, of course, no secret on the channel, big fans of holiday horror, and being able to cover some new stuff coming out, uncover some old stuff, and just, Dylan put together the phenomenal graphic, and I think I still have so much nostalgia, even though it's only been a few months, but to hear that that theme playing every time in front of all of our videos was just such a great time. I mean, it's just like looking at Splatterthon, looking at December to Dismember, it's always just so much fun to kind of have these little theme things for the month. For me, there's nothing better.
Absolutely. And I mean, we've already started planning Splatterthon and it's May right now. I mean, we started in July last year, just talking about it. And I was like, yeah, I'll make some graphics and stuff. But it was one of those things where I think we were sitting there at like September 30th or 29th or whatever. And we were just like, okay, here's kind of the layout. Here's what we got. Here are the new releases. You got Hellraiser, you got Halloween. We're going to talk about each of the Halloween movies each week. And, it just didn't feel like enough. So we started adding things to it. And then I started convincing you to add things to it because I'm a whore and I can't stop. But I was just like, let's just keep going. And before we knew it, it was just like, Jesus, man, we are really, just getting these things out by the skin of our teeth. And I think we planned a little better for December to Dismember, definitely. I think there was a point in the middle, I want to say by about chapter 5 in Silent Night, Deadly Night, where we were getting to that, plus our big crescendo with our big pitch on, what we would do with the franchise. They kind of overlapped to the point where I was just like, oh man, like this is getting tight. But I don't think that you're going to be able to avoid that really. I think the biggest thing we can do from this point out is just try to dedicate more time. But also we got to appreciate you guys for being understanding too, because, we're both new fathers still. Our kids aren't like mine's barely over 1 year old and Luke hasn't even gotten there yet. So, we're sitting there and it's like, we got that on our plate. We got wives, we got jobs, day jobs and everything. But I mean, really at the end of the day, this is a lot of fun, man. I've enjoyed doing this. This is, even though it can be stressful sometimes, it's nice to just, when you get it done, you get it out there and you get some positive response to it, and seeing more people subscribe and more people comment and like things. It's just like, it's nice. And, we're still learning. We're still figuring out how to structure things. We're still figuring out, what's going to work for us. I mean, obviously you guys have really responded to the video essays that we've done. So, I know Luke's got a couple of really good ones up his sleeve that he's been talking about. And I've got a couple that I'm circling right now. We're going to try to do those a little bit more frequently. But yeah, I mean, we're just going to do our best. I think I think that we've learned a lot this year, and yeah, I mean, I can't thank you guys enough for, just subscribing and staying tuned.
Absolutely. It's one of those things where, I mean, we have so much stuff that we haven't even had the chance to uncover yet. We have so many things in the chamber that we're just waiting to, find the time to unleash. So,
You have a whole segment that we've been trying to get off the ground since Splatterthon.
yep. And
That's just like, I think it's a brilliant idea, and when it hits, I think it's going to be nice.
yeah, and
Yeah.
it's going to be a lot of fun. And there's a lot of things out there that we just haven't had the chance to, dedicate the time to. So, as we said, during the Sunday Scaries this past week, where we kind of dialed it back and kind of had the time to kind of recalibrate in a sense, and maybe over the next couple months, kind of decide on having that extra time to decide what is going to be coming out here that's going to make the channel even more unique. So, again, reflecting, you get nostalgic, you think about driving 45 minutes to see the mean one, and and then being able to talk to the director, which gives you a whole different experience in terms of filmmaking and being in that headspace as a creator. But looking back on that and all the great moments that we've had, and knowing that there are so many more great moments to come doing this podcast, and going to see so many more great horror films.
Absolutely. We've still got a stacked year coming ahead of us. Lots of fun stuff. I mean, currently, as we're recording this, we're sitting in the midst of the writer's strike. So I don't know how long that's going to last. We might get through the rest of this year, and next year be kind of rocky, but that does give us more opportunity to talk about some older films, which we're going to do today. But before we kind of get into that, I do got to make the announcement this Friday, and I'm going to put this up after the video goes up later today, just up on our channel and up on all our social media. So if you guys want to follow us, you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, all at SplatterCast Pod, where we on Friday are going to be doing a to be decided time. I'll put that up in the post. It's just a live stream hangout, again, kind of like a town hall thing. We're just going to sit on the stream for a little bit, bullshit, talk to you guys, probably go over some horror conversations, talk about news, maybe we'll watch some clips on YouTube, things like that. Really just have a sit down hangout with you guys and just let it go. I mean, I'm sure we'll have people like El Rayo there in our corner, of course. And I hope that a lot of you guys will show up to that. And yeah, we're just going to celebrate and see where we're at with, the channel and everything, and just kind of maybe even gauge to see what kind of content you guys would want to see coming from us, as we get up there, as we, move this channel along. Of course, the goal is, we do this for fun. Of course, I don't want to sound like we're, only in it to make a profit or anything. We're not here for that, but boy, we'd love to do this full time. So like, if we could get there, obviously as we get up there, we'll do things like memberships and Patreon, probably, where we can get you guys more exclusive content, more personalized content and things like that. But yeah, I just would like to start getting the community more involved as we go. Yeah, I would love to do merch. My God, we have so many fucking stupid ideas for merch. Like it's awesome. Like, I mean, Luke got us the mugs right off the rip. That was something we have here. Obviously, we'll make those available when we can justify it. But we want to make sure first and foremost that what we're putting out for you guys is good, you enjoy it, and then hopefully the opportunity to do this full time and be able to be supported by the community and everything will come as it goes along. And I mean, that's the whole thing here. That's why we're working so hard to secure interviews, try to get some interesting content for you guys, get screeners. I mean, we got to thank people like Screambox. They've been very good to us. Welcome Villain, the guys over there. We've got some pretty cool opportunities that I can't talk about right now that are in the chamber. We just got to see if they're going to get fired upon. We got to do some applications, things like that. And yeah, it could be a really, really interesting couple months late summer here. And of course, we've got a lot of good buddies too. I can't believe we forgot to mention this, but we've got Evan from Rockland Graves and Alex from the Beyond the Void podcast. Those two gentlemen, wonderful guys. Absolutely love it. We're definitely going to be doing more content with them. We've already done a couple of videos with Evan, and Alex, I mean, he kicked off Splattercast Cinema with us. and I loved that. It takes a lot to edit, but we have a lot of plans for that. So I hope you guys are ready. Those were really fun to do. Alex certainly enjoyed it, so I'd love to make him a mainstay on that, and then we just keep moving on. I know Luke's got a pick that I'm very eager to see, and I've got a pick that's going to be very timely with its release, and then Alex's pick is absolutely bonkers. So I'm very excited to do that. So thank you to both you gentlemen for taking the chance on us and starting our little friendship here, our little channel friendship. We appreciate it.
It's all about people talking to people.
Yes, it is. Oh, and of course, God damn it, like we're gonna have to really do it up on the live stream. But we got to talk about Talking Tremors a little bit.
Oh,
Those guys over there have been wonderful. I mean, like we got Levi, who's just this huge ball of energy. He comes on and
absolutely
gives us
love
a
him.
fantastic interview. But yeah, I mean, Tremors 2 was a huge podcast for us. I say that's the first podcast that I think really started to get us noticed by some of you guys. I know that we gained a lot of subscribers off of that. At the time, I think it was like 10 or 15 subs, which was a big deal. But like, yeah, no, when we got on their radar, that started that relationship with Levi. So yeah, of course, we gotta love talking about that.
Yeah, and doing our little Talking Tremors, the Unearthing Perfection that we did with
Mhm.
Levi, I think was a lot of fun. I think we have something we had talked about to him in the works here. Hopefully, that will show up maybe as sometime over the summer. So a lot more to come there. And just thinking back again on the podcast, like doing so much research on Tremors 2 was absolutely so much fun for me. And then even Child's Play 2. My love for sequels, as I sit here with a Maniac Cop 2 t-shirt on. I'm sure you can expect so many more sequels to come over the next year.
Absolutely, I am very excited. But why don't we take things back a little bit? We've discussed it. We've done one other related topic to this. As you can see the background, you can see this. You read the title. You know what it is. We're talking Silver Bullet. And of course, if you have been with us from the start or you've gone back to take a look, episode 1 of this relaunch for SplatterCast, Werewolves, Not Swearwolves. We talked a whole mess of werewolf films. And Silver Bullet was one that we covered a little bit more extensively than the others on there. We didn't get too deep, but we did express our love and appreciation for this film. And yeah, we just decided, I think when I brought up, Luke, we're coming up on the year, we got to get a podcast going. This guy was like, well, you know what? You know what I'm thinking? We did Swearwolves, Not Werewolves. And then I'm just like, Silver fucking Bullet. And he's like, there you go. And that's where this happened. So yes, we are here. We're here to discuss Silver Bullet. And Luke, I will let you kick things off. What was your first exposure to this film?
Oh, man. Well, I don't necessarily remember the very first time I watched Silver Bullet. I've expressed a few times on this podcast when we do cover Stephen King properties that my dad was a huge fan of Stephen King. So this was a film that was always in rotation for me as a kid, was always on the television whenever it would pop on. And, as a kid, you're always just watching segmented things sometimes. And I just remember seeing this film a lot and, always being compelled by, the kills in it. And especially, toward the end, I know there's going to be controversy and we'll talk about it later about the werewolf. But, as a kid, when you're just watching that stuff and you're seeing a big werewolf pop in, no matter the quality of it or what it looks like, it always just kind of glues you to the television. So there are a few scenes in here, when we get into the story. I mean, there's the fog scene with the band of the townsmen coming out. Always memorable, and one of my favorite scenes. So there are so many different scenes in Silver Bullet that would stick into my head. And then as I grew up, this was one that when it was on television, I would make the time to sit down and always watch it, no matter if it was a half hour in, an hour in, and I was only going to get that last act, or if it was the entire film. I always made time to watch this.
Oh, absolutely. And this is one of those movies for me that was introduced by my mother. She's a big werewolf person, or was. So it's one of those things where I saw American Werewolf in London through her, and this was one I remember the first time I ever caught a glimpse of this movie. I don't think I watched the entirety of it, because again, I was a child, and the setup here will totally you'll understand. We were on a trip. I don't know whether we were going to Kansas City, Missouri, or another state that some of my cousins lived in at some point. We were going to visit family. And we stopped at a hotel because I was very young. And I think that, they didn't want to do the whole drive in one go when I was that young. But I remember them, we went to dinner, came back to the hotel. It was a hotel with a pool. I didn't grow up with a pool. So even if it was only for an hour or whatnot, I'm getting in that damn pool. But I remember us getting ready and my mom and dad flipping on the TV. And I think it was because the hotel had like free HBO or whatever. So they were just flipping through. And my mom flips on Silver Bullet right at the point where Marty is on the bridge, launching fireworks and enjoying his time. And I'm just watching this werewolf stalk this kid. And I'm just like, what the fuck is this? And I hadn't seen American Werewolf in London by this point. I didn't see that until I was a bit older. So, werewolves were something I was aware of, but it was something that it was like, the media, because most of it was rated R at the time. I think the most I had seen at that point was probably Van Helsing. But I was in the know. I was like, okay, this is cool. I like this. And as a kid, you don't look at those effects and you don't think like, oh, this is, goofy looking or anything. You're just into it. The tension's there. The music's there. I see the wolf sticking its head out of the fucking brush. And I'm just like, holy fuck, I gotta watch. Exactly. That stuff too. And I'm just like, holy shit. And I was so sucked in at that moment. And I watched that whole scene play out and the werewolf's gone. And then it was like, well, we got to go to the pool or you got to finish the movie. And I was like, all right, I'm going to go pool. So, that's what happened. It wasn't till years later that it would be on TV. It'd be on like AMC, of course, and things like that, that I caught it in its entirety on TV. And then even years after that, I think Netflix had it streaming early on. And I watched the uncut uncut. It's not like it's that gruesome or anything. The violence is pretty raw in a couple spots, but I think this could play on TV pretty well. But it's one of those things where I got to see that in its entirety. And yeah, I mean, it was honestly, this is one of those movies where I knew it was love at first sight, even though I hadn't seen the entire film. I just saw that one sequence. I was like, mentally, my brain said, I need to get back to this.
I mean, it's one of those, you go back to Werewolves Not Swearwolves, and we bring it up a plethora of times. I think probably even more than any of the other werewolf films that we talk about. And it's character, it's setting, it's the tone of the film, it's a lot of the tension that they do bring. And Gary Busey, Corey Haim. I know we're going to talk about all this, so I'm not going to go too in depth. But it's just like
Everett
for
McGill.
me, this is just one of those films that werewolf, no werewolf. They nailed it, and it's like one of those ones where you always go back to. It's like John Carpenter's Halloween. It's one of those ones that you just have so much fun going back and reliving. It's so digestible, and you can honestly flip it on a rainy Saturday afternoon and just have so much fun with it.
Yeah, and this is something too where it's like, this is a movie you and I definitely bonded over.
Yes.
In our early days of just getting to know each other at the video store. Like, I'm sure I don't remember exactly. I mean, your memory is better than me on some of this, but when this came up with us, but like, I just remember we discussed this at one point and just the affinity we both had for it was just kind of like, oh man, about Silver Bullet. I know, kind of thing. So it's like, it's just one of those things where it's like, I think that's also why this is, always been an important movie to me, but has grown over the years because we can share this kinship on it. Because I'll even say that I think that my definitive is probably going to be American Werewolf. As far as like favorite werewolf movie of all time, because that movie, when we get to it eventually, is also extremely special to me. Because again, that was my mother's favorite and she's not with us anymore. So it's one of those things where it's like, that was always a sticking point. That was a staple. Like that moment watching that movie for the first time will always be in my head. And this one, again, mentally made a checkpoint, but is something that over the years has grown and is something that, I can say has become easily number 2 for me of my favorite werewolf films of all time.
Yeah, and for me, I put Silver Bullet in a class in the sense where, you look at the elite films of horror, if you want to have one, where I think American Werewolf falls into that. I think The Shining falls into that. I think John Carpenter's Halloween falls into that. The Thing. All these films, I equate Silver Bullet to like, you know, Halloween and Halloween 4, where it's like,
Mhm.
Halloween, the original Halloween's a masterpiece, but 4 is a lot of fun to go back and
Yes.
just turn on. Whereas like American Werewolf in London, definitive werewolf film, but Silver Bullet for me, I find myself putting this one on more just to enjoy. So it's kind of like, a perfect werewolf film as opposed to just one that is so much joy brought to just flipping it on and coming in and out, going to do other things and not studying this one frame by frame.
We talked about that a little bit over the phone when we were just gearing up to do this like about a week ago, where it was just like we watched this both with commentaries and on its own a handful of times. It's just that digestible for us. It's like kind of a sweet treat that I'm always happy to have. It's like I can watch this back to back, honestly, pretty close, because I watched commentary one day and the next day I threw it back on. So it's just something where it's like, this is that horror comfort food that I'm always talking about. This is, again, another one that I want to throw on that pile, because it's just like everything from the tone, the humor, the horror, the essence of this even being an adaptation of a Stephen King novelette is one of those things where it's like, it's got a very perfect concoction that I feel like as time has gone on, especially since Scream Factory put out this beautiful Blu-ray a couple years back, more people are starting to hop on board and, find this movie or revisit it again and kind of look at it a little bit more respectfully than they did even back when it first came out.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot to uncover here. This is one of those films, especially as we've done more research than probably ever we ever have in terms of, actually like diving deep into Silver Bullet. And it's like looking at something, the novella and the actual film itself. I talk about adaptations and, having their own unique voice. It's like Silver Bullet, as opposed to Cycle of the Werewolf, has its own unique voice. It feels
Mhm.
different. Yes, there's some parallels that you can draw, but it's something where it's like, this deserves to be its own film. Going into it, there's an elaboration of a story that we don't necessarily get in Cycle of the Werewolf. So, I think you can look at both these as, point counterpoint, where it's like, oh, well, Cycle of the Werewolf is great. Also, Silver Bullet has its own voice and it gives you something unique in itself. So it's like one of those things where it's enjoyable from all points of view. And looking at the screenplay, as we will get into, there was a lot of things that I wish, we talk about long run times in films. This film would have benefited greatly from like another 20 minutes from my perspective.
I'm excited to hear, because I did not dive into the screenplay like you did, but I did listen to the reading of or I guess I should say the dramatization of Cycle of the Werewolf, which we are going to dive into our first segment. But yeah, that is something that we did do a lot of research for this. We tried to make the return, make the coming back to it as eventful as we could, especially because it's the 1 year anniversary. And I would say the funny thing that you bring that up is, like, as far as research and as far as time put into it, um you know the last movie that I feel like I did a ton of research on was our Dog Soldiers video, because there was so much that I learned while watching the special features and then getting into it, where I was just like, holy shit, I didn't know about all this Blu-ray release drama, and that the print was missing and all that stuff. Like, so it's kind of funny that it seems like we get to our heavy, got to put our thinking caps on and our glasses and dive into all the material for werewolf films. So
It's one that deserves the attention to detail, I feel.
Absolutely. And so I guess without further ado, why don't we hop into our first segment, which we like to call the account of the macabre.
They could not have expected, nor would they have wished to see as much of the mad and macabre as they were to see that day. For them, an idyllic summer afternoon drive became a nightmare.
Yes, and this is where we like to get into the story of Silver Bullet, where we're going to have Luke read us a beautiful synopsis that he's cooked up for us. As I like to say, he's the maestro of words on this show. I default to Wikipedia or IMDb for my synopsises most of the time. I always credit them, but it is one of those things where Luke is just way better with words. And yeah, I'm just going to let him take it away.
Oh boy, look at you, setting me up here already. Now I'm self-conscious. Now, I did my best. Going into this, I never had to put, watching Silver Bullet so many times, you never have to put this piece by piece together. So I think I got fairly adequate synopsis in my own words. So without further ado, let's get into the synopsis of Silver Bullet. Crack open a cold one because Arnie Restrom is working the late shift again. With only the railroad and a case of Rheingold to keep him company, old Arnie loses his head when he forgets to duck after a visit from Tarkers Mill's resident werewolf. During the town's festivities for the Med-Q drive, we meet local troublemakers Marty Coleslaw and his buddy Brady. After playing a mean prank on Marty's sister, Jane, causing her to fall and tear her pantyhose, Marty is quick to ask for forgiveness with his little brother charm. The town becomes a feast for the local werewolf as people begin to fear the full moon, wondering if it's a maniac or something more supernatural. After Brady's death, Marty gets in touch with his inner Van Helsing as he confides in Uncle Red that a werewolf may be the culprit. With bellies full of beer and itchy trigger fingers, the barflies at Owens decide to take the law into their own hands for a little private justice. Exercising their Fifth Amendment, they load their shotguns and head into the woods to find the maniac. Getting lost in the fog, our furry friend has a midnight snack as he slashes the population of Tarkers Mills. After the massacre, Sheriff Holler cancels the fireworks celebration in an attempt to not provide another town potluck for our fanged beast. Better late than never, Marty celebrates the 4th of July, courtesy of Uncle Red. Letting off some fireworks, the werewolf crashes Marty's party, but wasn't told the price of admission was his left eye. Blinded by a rocket, Marty makes his escape on the Silver Bullet, living to take the beast on another day. When Jane finds out Reverend Lowe is sporting an eye patch, they begin to suspect he is collecting a little more than just donations from the little town. After sending the Reverend a few notes indicating he might be better off dead, Reverend Lowe realizes it isn't easy to turn the other cheek when you're missing an eye. Feeling more like a sinner than a saint, Reverend Lowe tries to kill Marty as he attempts to run him off the road. Too fast and too furious, and with the Holy Ghost riding shotgun, the Silver Bullet and Marty escape the grasp of the killer clergyman. After finding blue paint on Marty's Silver Bullet, Uncle Red gets Sheriff Holler to check out Reverend Lowe. When the sheriff disappears, Marty has Uncle Red get a silver bullet made as he anticipates an impending brawl with the beast. No more treats and only tricks left on Halloween night. Marty, Jane, and Uncle Red stay up waiting. When the werewolf breaks down the wall, surprising the bunch, he realizes the Coleslaw family is all out of candy and only has a silver bullet left to hand out. When Madman Marty shoots out the werewolf's other eye, the beast begins to turn back into Reverend Lowe as he dies in the living room. Marty, Jane, and Uncle Red watch what's left of the full moon as they celebrate another one for the good guys. And that, my friends, is Silver Bullets in a nutshell.
Yes, and it's a wonderful story. Again, this is something that it is that perfect concoction, man. It's got the humor, the charm, everything under the sun that just kind of makes this, in my opinion, a perfect small town Stephen King-esque story. You know, you take this larger than life creature and he just brings a little bit of that everyday man personality to it. And I think it's captured beautifully on screen. We're going to discuss Cycle of the Werewolf a little bit in this segment because, again, we've listened to it recently. I know we've both read it. I still need to get a copy. I borrowed a copy from a friend of mine years ago because I was interested in it and I knew it was a shorter Stephen King book. So, do you own it on paperback or anything?
Unfortunately, I do not. It was one of the ones actually. I own it digitally. I own like a Stephen King bundle. And that's where I originally read it from. I do want to get it just because I love actual having the physical copies in a collection. So it's one that, admittedly, after us doing some research here, I had looked up to see how readily available it is, which it is. So I'm definitely
It's
going to
like
be.
$13 on Amazon.
Yep, it's not bad at all. So I'm going to definitely add that one into the collection because it's one, as we're gonna dive deeper into Cycle the Werewolf. It's one that is just one of those things where you see so much potential, so much great imagery brought by Stephen King, and then Silver Bullet does again a great job at finding its own voice, but there is so much left on the table in terms of Cycle of the Werewolf as well.
Absolutely. And I got to give some credit to a channel that posted a dramatization of this story about 5 months ago. It's called Yes Have Some. They're sitting at about 1.41 thousand subs. They did a fantastic job. I know we both got a chance to listen to this.
Yes.
And beforehand, I had just looked up when I wanted to hear this, or like, because I like to throw on audiobooks and stuff when I'm working, or when I'm like trying to go to sleep or something, I'll just listen to it. But this is one where I started listening to it before bed, and I realized that it was this audio drama and just how in depth they were going. And I was like, I'm going to save this for when I'm awake. And, I listened to this while I was at work, and I was just so enthralled by the life they were able to give this story, and just what they were able to kind of shed into these disturbing sounds and things like that they brought to it. And I gotta say, they did a fantastic job, and I highly recommend everybody check it out. I'm gonna leave a link for it in the description. If any of you guys from that channel are watching this, or if you guys want to let them know that we're shouting them out for this, please do, because again, I think they completely deserve it. If you have not read or listened to Cycle of the Werewolf yet, and you're only familiar with the movie, this is definitely a wonderful first exposure.
Absolutely. And, we both read it. And then Dylan sent me the dramatization of Cycle the Werewolf, which I'd listened to. As, Dylan expressed, we're both new fathers and time has become a little more limited. It becomes, so nice to either just throw on a random audiobook. But I would say this dramatization of Cycle the Werewolf was just absolutely such a treat because, I listened to it while I was cooking dinner, doing dishes, all this stuff. So, I have a vivid memory of me listening to the very beginnings of this book on starting in the January and February, and drying dishes and staring out of my French doors in the kitchen and being thoroughly freaked out.
Oh, yes, they do a good job with that sound.
Yes, and so I would definitely want to thank those guys for attributing to a few of my nightmares over the last week and a half, because this again is such a treat. If you haven't listened to it, definitely click that link. I think, what is it? Is it like 2 hours or something like that? It's a breeze to get through, just to listen to, and it really just kind of lets you go on that ride with them. And I mean, they add so many great sound effects. The reading of it's just phenomenal, and you get to really experience what Stephen King has on that page.
Yeah, it's probably the most enjoyable way to consume the novel if you're not just sitting down and reading it yourself, I would say. And it's completely free on YouTube. So again, yes, that is the channel Yes Have Some. So please check them out. But yeah, why don't we discuss, since we discussed our thoughts on Silver Bullet, we'll keep it kind of brief for time's sake. But Luke, how do you feel about Cycle of the Werewolf? How not necessarily, maybe giving you a little brief of your first exposure to it, but just overall, how do you feel it compares to the film?
I think again, Cycle of the Werewolf is its own entity in a sense where I love the way when Stephen King was writing the screenplay, kind of plucked out some of the main themes and kind of intertwined some of the characters that we do see in Cycle of the Werewolf, even though they're not really touched upon, in depth in Silver Bullet. You can kind of be like, oh, well, that's, the character from Cycle the Werewolf, and you kind of can connect the parallels of like, so this is the fate of this character, even though we don't really get it in Silver Bullet. But Cycle the Werewolf, being the novella that it is, and I think it is what, maybe 120 some pages, I believe is the page
Mhm.
count of it. And again, it works more so as an anthology, month to month, which again, great concept, especially when the beginnings of it, which is supposed to be such a small project in itself, and then becoming this novella, an extensive thing, and just rich source material. There is so much in here, again, that is untouched, with Silver Bullet, that you can kind of go back. So many killings in this thing are great. There's one of a diner owner, and for
Oh, I
me,
love that scene so much.
seeing his reflection, I would have loved to see how that would have translated to film. Just where they kind of in its own way, I like that they say that the diner owner knows who that character is,
Mhm.
but we're not attributed to who that character is. And then he sees the reflection in his, I can't remember what the soda machine, maybe something like that. And as a transformation, I would have loved to have seen that, being brought to life on film. But again, Cycle the Werewolf offers so many different things. I urge anyone to go read this, because rating this in my first exposure to it, as I think Dylan, you had read it prior to me reading it, and
Mhm.
it was one of those things where it gives you a lot of potential to say, "Ooh, I could write my own werewolf property," So it kind of really inspires you, I think.
Hint, hint. Yeah, definitely revert back to this in, maybe 10 years if we ever get so lucky. But, it's one of those things where, yeah, it was a very pivotal time for us as, screenwriters and storytellers when we picked this book up, because, again, we're huge Silver Bullet fans. But, yeah, reading this for the first time and just sitting down, I think it took me about 2 days of just like between shifts, my video store. I was just working a long week, so instead of watching anything, I just came home and read. I got stoned and read. So that's what I did.
You
And
beat it.
yeah, I freaked myself out at a couple of those you know sequences, especially honestly, there's a sequence late in the book with hogs where nobody actually gets murdered, but still, just the imagery and the way they describe it, I catch myself. At the time, I was at my dad's still, and I was just looking up out of the basement window because that's where my room was. And I'm just like sitting there, just like, oh man, something's gonna be staring at me through that window. And then, yeah, the scene you described is also very memorable. One of the things that really sticks out to me as just a big Silver Bullet fan, is the way that they chose to change the death in the film of Arnie. Is it Arnie Westrom?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. And how in the book, I feel like it's so much more visceral and so much more intense. In the movie, it's memorable for sure, but it's so quick because they're just trying to get through the intro. But I mean, just the scratching at the door and the whimpering of the wolf trying to trick him, in a sense, is just like really off-putting. That is something I'd absolutely adore seeing an adaptation of, just on screen, where it's like you have the snow and the little shack being busted into and everything. Like, it's just a very ripe story, I think, to be um, re-brought to life, and I think we'll touch on that towards the end of the show here a little bit more. But yeah, I think that if you are a fan of Silver Bullet and you haven't read Cycle of the Werewolf, I also recommend checking this out, because it is a very different experience, and you do get some changes. You get a lot of changes to the story itself. Certain characters aren't as big in the film, which, somebody like an Uncle Red isn't as big of a character in the film itself. I mean, even you know, our main characters aren't. Marty isn't that big of a character for the first half of the novel. So like the first hour of the dramatization, you are going through that month to month segment, because originally this was slated to be just a calendar that Stephen King was supposed to write quick little blurbs of, called Cycle of the Werewolf. where each month had just a little story, with some illustrations by Bernie Wrightson, which are just absolutely fucking phenomenal. If you've ever seen any of these illustrations, they paint that, they burn into your brain as far as just the look of the werewolf. I think they capture that tone and that fear so well. And it is one of the few Stephen King novels, or novelettes, as he likes to coin it, that has illustrations in it. So it's something that it's a bit of a treat for you, if you are a Stephen King fan and you haven't experienced the story.
Yeah, and again, Cycle the Werewolf, if you haven't read it, and again, I hope you do, it's very segmented, month by month by month. And like Dylan said, we're not really focusing necessarily on Marty until, what is it, July maybe? So we're kind of really going
Pretty
through the
much,
town.
yeah.
We go through the town of Tarkers Mills, and like that is one of the things where I look at something like An American Werewolf in London, and that's more so almost a fish out of water story, where it's an American, coming over to London and being bitten by a werewolf and dealing with different things. Whereas, Silver Bullet for me, I almost feel is a little more eerie in a sense, where we have this town that, it's a slice of the Midwestern kind of, um, apple pie, fireworks on 4th of July type deal. And then you're dropping this beast in. There is no comfort anymore from where you live. You're not a fish out of water. Everything familiar to you has now become a threat because you have this beast in here. And that's why I kind of like the story of Silver Bullet a little bit more, just because and the film itself opens up the town of Tarkers Mills and the Cycle the Werewolf. Again, there are some stories in there that are never touched on in Silver Bullet, but you could really bring those to life and really open up this town of Tarkers Mills. And that's why I said that, I think this film here could have benefited for another 20 minutes, where it's like you can really open up a few different things, some more characters and some more stories and some more kills, if you have another 20 minutes in this film.
Absolutely. And I'm excited to get into the screenplay with you here, but we're going to save that for our next segment when we talk production. Because obviously, from the commentaries we listened to on the Scream Factory release, which I highly recommend picking up if you don't own and you're a Silver Bullet fan, it's so good. It is, they do touch on there being some very funny differences. Something that I thought was a little odd, but I was curious to see. But you have read the whole thing, so we're going to be able to hear a lot of changes and a lot of your thoughts on what you think there. But I mean, if we're just talking about the film itself here, and we're just getting into it now that we've kind of discussed its origins with Cycle of the Werewolf. This was directed by is it David Atlas? David Attles?
It's Daniel Atias, I believe is how it's pronounced.
Oh, Dan Atias, gotcha. I don't know why I said David Atlas, but yeah, Dave Atias is how you say it. Written by Stephen King. Of course, this was his screenplay. He actually got brought on by producer Dino De Laurentiis, who is somebody who's very famous when it comes to a lot of different variants of cinema. He's huge in the horror space in the 80s.
Psycho 2.
Absolutely. But he's also big with a lot of action and a lot of other things. So Dino De Laurentiis is somebody that we will discuss probably. This won't be the last time. I'm sure we'll discuss him again. We've already talked about him with Psycho 2, but it's something of a staple when it comes to mid to late 80s horror. And we've got a cast of just like people like Corey Haim, Gary Busey, Everett McGill. I mean, those three names alone, and they're just the top of the cast list here, are absolutely stellar. Like, it's kind of amazing that this little Stephen King story in the broad spectrum of things, when, you have things like The Shining and stuff, which are set to come out in Salem's Lot, where it's just like the name Stephen King attracts these actors, because a lot of these actors are in their absolute prime. I mean, Gary Busey is in his prime in this, and he's like, yeah, I'm going to go do Silver Bullet. Whether that was to work with, I doubt it was to work with Dan Atias, because this was his first film. But, whether that was just a favor because he was like, oh, I want to work with Dino De Laurentiis, I kind of doubt that. But, or it's just, it's got to be the name Stephen King that attracted him to this.
Yeah, because this was when we were really in the go of Stephen King properties being translated from the original source material into actual film. I mean, we covered Christine, and that film was before it even the book was even out. They were already starting, filming in production of Christine. So it was just like one of those things where Carrie, all this stuff, it had such a long lineage of, when you have Stephen King's whatever, it's going to bring a lot of talent to that film because you see things like The Shining, and regardless of what Stephen King feels of it, or Carrie, or a lot of these films where it's like, they were appointment kind of films where it's like, oh yeah, well, this comes out such and such, so we got to go see it. It was a really big thing. I think it helped almost shape the 80s, in terms of what we had gotten eventually later on with the sequelitis and in so many, horror franchises becoming what they were. I think, Stephen King was a big player in that. I think what his 1974 was his first book, maybe. But, I think toward the mid 70s to the late 70s really got just general audiences in pop culture really interested in horror. And I think that really helped shape the 80s in terms of all these films being made.
Absolutely, because I mean, like, we had Salem's Lot in like 76, I want to say, or is that Carrie? I know some of them were the late 70s, but Silver Bullet comes out right in the middle of just like, I mean, 83 and 83 alone, actually, we had Christine and Cujo. Because I wrote these ones down here, and then we had like Cat's Eye was the same year as Silver Bullet. I know that's kind of a nostalgic one for a lot of people. I forgot Dead Zone was also 83.
Yeah.
So like 83 was big. Children of the Corn in 84. Followed up shortly after a couple years later with Pet Sematary, and even just kicking off the 80s, we had The Shining. So it's like, this is like really prime time Stephen King. I mean, he had his George Romero collaboration with Creepshow in 82. Yeah. Stand By Me was the next year after this. And then, of course, Maximum Overdrive was also the year after this. But, like, it's whether you love or hate some of these movies, which, I mean, honestly, these are a lot of great flicks. It's prime time Stephen King. So it's like the fact that, like, you could put his name on any script and attract people like Everett McGill and, obviously Gary Busey. It's pretty great. Because, I mean, at the time, I'm going to double check this real quick. What was Gary Busey doing like at this? Because I feel like this has got to be coming right up on his, because like this was right before his early to mid 90s with like, Point Break and Lethal Weapon and all that, right? Coming up. So
this was before all that stuff. So I don't know what he was coming off of, right? During Silver Bullet here, but he was he nominated for an Academy Award? Did he win? I can't remember if he was a winner or not, but I mean, that was that late 70s. So I mean, like, to have Gary Busey in a Stephen King film was a huge get, and looking at, you go back to Carrie, Cujo, and you look at the cast and all those things and what they all went on to go do. I mean, there were a lot of big gets in these Stephen King films.
Dude, holy shit. Like, I'm looking at this right now, and like it would only be 2 years later he does Lethal Weapon coming off this. So like realistically, like my era Gary Busey that I grew up with like Lethal Weapon, Point Break, and Predator 2, none of that had hit yet. But before that, he was definitely he was definitely a character actor. He was in movies like A Star Is Born, and stuff like that, like the 70s rendition of that. He was on Gunsmoke for a couple episodes, Thunderbolt and Lightfoot, things like that. So, he'd been around for a while as kind of just a character actor at this point. But then it's kind of like Silver Bullet. I know for most probably isn't there, like, that's the make or break. We're going in Gary Busey with that. But like, yeah, I mean, it's really right before Lethal Weapon and then followed up by Predator 2 just a couple of years later. So, and if you know the podcast at all, Predator 2.
I mean,
it's absolutely gorgeous.
Another great sequel.
Movie. Exactly. Another great Gary Busey flick. But yeah, no, I mean, getting off just those two, because I mean, Everett McGill, we didn't really talk about him much. I mean, he was definitely known at this time for, or around this time, I want to, no, when did, Twin Peaks was until the 90s, wasn't it?
Yeah, now I don't think he started working with David Lynch just yet.
Yeah, so but I know that he definitely he started working with David Lynch quite a bit here. But I mean, even him, he was somebody who was a name in Hollywood. So you know, that was a big get for them. But here, while I'm pulling him up, I guess we can talk, because someone I do know off the top of my head is Corey Haim.
Yeah, and I think he was coming just off of Lucas at this point.
Oh, this is, I'm sorry, for Everett McGill. This is what I was going to bring up. I just needed to double check. He did star as one of the characters in that damn show we're trying to get a hold of for Werewolf.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's just like, yeah, we got to find that. If anybody knows how we can watch that fucking show, let us know. We want to cover it really bad.
Primetime Terrors is itching for Werewolf.
Absolutely. But yeah, he's a big reoccurring character in that, apparently, because he did 29 episodes of it. So
does he play a reverend?
I don't think so. His name is Sweet Jake Williams. So but yeah, up to this point he was in, so he was working with David Lynch at this point, because he was in Dune.
That's right. Okay, yeah.
And he had just done Quest for Fire. And yeah, so that was about where he started to kick in. So he got kind of a later start. So he didn't really start popping into the scene, because his first flick was called Yankees in 1979. Or Yanks, sorry, not Yankees. My God, I'm fucking up today. But yeah, no, and then that's when he really started to kick off here, was going into things like Twin Peaks and License to Kill, and then People Under the Stairs, which I know is another big one for you there. So yeah, but Everett McGill was somebody that I recognize the face and the name, and I gotta say it's probably this film that has him stick in my head. But yes, I will now let you go back to Corey Haim. So you go ahead and do your little introduction for him there.
I mean, Corey Haim, yeah, I think he was coming off of Lucas at this time, pretty much unknown. But like I think. And we'll probably touch on him when we get into the actual cast itself. Just someone that, like, at this point in time, what would later become, the two Coreys. This hadn't happened yet. So, like, looking at, and we talk about it with Stranger Things and things, it's a gamble to make a child actor, the central character, because, sometimes it works out. Sometimes it's just an absolute travesty on film. And, this one, what Corey Haim was able to bring to the Marty character, and the sympathy that you want, and also that kind of relationship he has with his sister on film, absolutely relatable. Like, seeing him, at the very beginning, when we open up as Brady cons him into playing on a trick with his sister, and then coming back and giving her the money for the pantyhose. I think that idea there, and it is brought up with Stephen King, and there's a little extra that I think that they lose in the screenplay, which I think the film is better for it. Really kind of establishes the relationship and the likability of the Marty character. And I think Corey Haim is essential into bringing that kind of likability to the character on film.
Absolutely. And the reason I want to highlight these three we're going to talk about them again, like you said, in, our Everybody's a Suspect segment. But it is one of those things where it's like they really do, to me, kind of guide you through this film. And, obviously Marty is our central character. And, I do have to give, I guess I might be getting a little bit more of that cycle of the werewolf esque in it, because his sister is hardly in the book, in the novella. So really, they expanded her character quite a bit. And, that's really, again, I think that's all probably due to Stephen King. I think he wanted to make that brother-sister relationship more of a central focus, since he had the time to do it. And I agree with you. I think that is just a wonderful sequence where he brings her the money. You really see that, like, yes, she calls him a cripple and all these horrible things. and just really gets into him. But at the end of the day, they're still brother and sister. They're still there for each other, and I think that they do have a very beautiful relationship. And it's one of those things where it's like it becomes kind of the central heart, I would say, between her brother and her uncle. And we're talking about it was Megan Follows, I believe. I
Yeah.
don't have my notes pulled up right now.
Yep.
Was the sister, so I got to give her a name drop. But I want to say between Gary Busey, Corey Haim, and Megan Follows, by the end of this story, it's like they are really the family unit. And for having not a broken home or anything, like the mom and dad are in the story, but by the end of it you can just tell that like these three have a connection, and they've shared something that they're never going to have that connection with anybody else. And I kind of heard something, I don't know if it was a review or a podcast or something I listened to in preparation for this, that made me kind of question the voiceover a little bit. So the voiceover they put in the movie, it's speaking in past tense, but it always refers to Marty in past tense. Did you ever notice that? Like even
Yeah.
she talks about herself in the current tense. Do you think that Marty is no longer with them? Somebody posed that on a podcast, and I thought it was interesting.
Well, whoever listened or whoever did the podcast must have not listened to the producer commentary, because the producer commentary does confirm that Marty is supposed to have been passed on by this time, and she's kind of reflecting back.
Oh,
It's
wow.
it's a minute thing. It's the gentleman conducting the kind of commentary and asking the questions is how this is, Silver Bullet. I think the director commentary has that kind of dynamic as well, where there is a guy kind of almost guiding and asking questions during the duration of the film. He does pose that question toward the end of the film, and she just kind of gives a real quick answer that yes, that Marty has passed on, and that she's kind of more so reflecting back on the events, and that's why she says, I could not always say that I loved you, but I can say that now, and good night.
I think that now that you're bringing that up, I think that might have been the commentary that I heard that on.
Oh, okay.
Because through all the research, it was one of those things where I'm getting lines crossed here, but I think they brought that up to the director also.
Oh, okay.
Because was it the same guy conducting the interview?
Yes, same guy conducting.
Okay, so I
both
think
interviews.
they did.
I only listened to a small portion of the director commentary. Time did not allow for me to kind of get through everything, but I realized that it was the same.
The same here. I only listened to the first part of the producer, and then I just ended up watching the movie. So, yeah, but I thought that was always interesting. It's a light that I never saw in this film before, is like thinking about it like that, and it just adds another layer of just almost heart to the story, in the sense that they go through all these crazy events, and they go on to live I guess mundane, boring lives afterwards. And I'm always curious. I want to know what happened to Uncle Red. I want to know if he ever got his shit together, stopped drinking all the time and everything. But I it's something that we're never going to be privy to. But I think, again, it just comes down to the performances, and it comes down to the relatability of the characters, and why I think that this is just one of those stories that will always stick with me.
Absolutely. And we'll get into probably the performances a little bit later to dissect them. But one of the things, again, why I look at this film, where, it's a slice of Midwestern kind of that family dynamic, where you look at Uncle Red and you look at Marty's mom, Nan, in their relationship as a brother and sister. And then you look at Marty and Jane in their relationship, and you can kind of draw those parallels. It really is about the relatability to the family unit and what is going on. And again, the great dynamic that Marty has with Jane, and then when you bring Uncle Red, who is a giant child in himself, into this dynamic of, no one else is going to believe him but Uncle Red. And then they kind of all band together to take on what Uncle Red is not necessarily sold on, believing that a werewolf is going to come, but he loves the kids and he wants them to, he knows something fishy's going on. And I love that dynamic of, as a kid, you always want your crazy thoughts. You want an adult to believe you, but them being adults and being more mature, they aren't going to believe your crazy wise tales. But Marty and Jane do find an adult that's going to go on this ride with them and even go get that silver bullet made. So I think that proves it just such a great family dynamic. And like you're saying, you always wonder what happened to this family afterward. And I think that's a great part of us not knowing what tomorrow looks like, but they vanquished the beast tonight. Who knows? Uncle Red could have went on a drunken bender a week from then after those events and seeing what he's seen, but we'll never know that, and we can just live in that moment of time of Marty and Jane, being brother and sister, embracing by the end of it, and that's the time that we get to live in.
Absolutely. And before we move on to our segment here, when we go into the production history of the film, we got to touch on the beast itself. So I know we're going to talk about it in Creatures Features, but I still think, costume, goofy, whatever you want to say about it aside, that it is a very impactful and very well used werewolf in this film. I think that, they worked with what they had, and I think that kind of played that Jaws effect to it, because we don't get the clearest look at it for a while, which I know is totally intentional, even though Dino De Laurentiis was very persistent on wanting this film to be very violent and very in your face with the werewolf. But they were just having a hell of a time. And, I think what we do get is very impactful. And beyond the actual werewolf itself, Everett McGill's character being this preacher, and being this holy man, this righteous character who has convinced himself that he had this horrible thing happen to him. In the book, they say that he just picked some flowers and he got cursed to becoming a werewolf. They never tell you how it happened in the movie, other than he never decided for this to happen. It's just God's will. He has justified to himself why he has to kill and why he has to do these things. It's God's plan, God's will. I think that ultimately makes him a very compelling, very interesting villain, because he has used scripture, as a lot of Stephen King villains have, to justify his actions. And I think that he's one of the best characters in Stephen King literature to do that, since oh god, what's her name? Mrs. whatever the hell from The Mist.
Oh yeah, I'm forgetting her name.
Yeah,
as
you
well.
know who I'm talking about, the crazy religious lady in that. Like, fucking great. But yeah, no, I think that he's definitely I wouldn't even necessarily call him a tragic character. With the werewolf kind of archetype, you look at a lot of people, they portray them as a tragic character. He understands what he's doing, and he knows, he's taken it on himself at one point, especially in the book. They kind of really lean into it, that he has decided that this is God's plan and this is what he's going to do.
And looking at something like Reverend Lowe, and I think really exemplifies Stephen King's complicated relationship with religion. If you follow him on Twitter, I don't think it's a secret at all, but it's one of those things where you look at Reverend Lowe, and some of the greatest villains are the ones that feel that justified in doing what they're doing. And again, there are a lot of great scenes in here, and one of my favorites is when Marty is being chased by Reverend Lowe in the car. And one of the eeriest scenes is when he gets stuck in the covered bridge, and seeing Reverend Lowe come up on him, and Reverend Lowe looking really disheveled, and then we're not used to seeing him that way, and looks more so like a maniac than he has ever have in the entire film. And he is saying, "Marty, you little shit," and all this stuff, and saying, Stella was going to kill herself, and she even verbalized that suicides go to hell, and he says, she would have went to hell. I killed her actual body, but I saved her soul from burning. And it's like those things where he feels completely justified in what he's doing. It was not it's not his fault, that he is a werewolf. And again, I love that they don't touch on how he became a werewolf. We don't spend time on that, and I think that's one of the unique things from the book as opposed to the film, where it just is, we're taking it face value, just go along for the ride. We have a werewolf, and I love that he kind of justifies it in his own head as to why he does these things. And how he's justifying, I would never willingly hurt a child, but he has no other choice here, so I love that they bring that dynamic to the Reverend. Again, I just love the idea that the bad guy in this is the Reverend. And especially when you look at the book and, you see him in so many, we already knew going into it who the villain is and, that type of thing. But it's like seeing that it's just such an ironic kind of tool that he uses, but it's absolutely so effective.
I agree. And yeah, I think that he's definitely one of the darker characters when you get into it. I mean, for such a movie that you don't really look at this as being super dark, it's more of a fun popcorn film. If you look at it, it is the motivations and the justification, of course, using that religious kind of downturn it's some pretty heavy stuff. I assume for very religious folk, to see that happening. And again, it does play into the whole aspect of, we do unfortunately know people in our own lives, or at least who surround us, who try to use scripture to justify heinous acts. And I mean, when you have a werewolf doing it, that's not great. Like that's not good at all. I don't like that. But yeah, I think that Reverend Lowe is definitely a character that I always find fascinating, just because, throughout so much of the story, he is just this very meek, mild-mannered character. And, when they do start to really ramp up and reveal that he is the werewolf, it really catches you off guard. And I like the book's variation of it almost a little more, with the fact that Marty didn't go to his church.
Yes.
So it's like, they never would have crossed paths otherwise. So when Marty finds out who the werewolf is, the werewolf has no idea, as opposed to the movie. He pretty much knows right from the get when he comes back, because obviously everything's going on. He's starting to connect the dots really quickly here, of that Marty is the one who took his eye out and everything. I know they kind of had to do that for time, and they kind of had to do that for, I guess, just the adaptation itself. But yeah, I almost like the fact that, in the book, Marty forces everybody's hand in the final chapters there, of just being like, yeah, I harassed him with letters for a couple of months, and now I've given myself up. You got to help me, Uncle Red, because I told him my name. And so it's like, he has no choice. Does he want his 10-year-old nephew's blood on his hands? No. So it's like, I like it. I think it's a very strong dynamic. And again, just having your Reverend character be the beast itself it's good. It's definitely not wholly original anymore, but definitely something that works very well in this story.
Especially at the time that this did come out.
Yeah.
I think, modern society now kind of works its way into understanding, just, typically good type of characters can be bad. And, there isn't necessarily this giant emphasis on religion, but, late 70s, mid 80s, I think it was still a very heavy thing. So I think it's a very unique subject matter to cover for that time. And we're talking about the differences in the book, whereas Reverend Lowe has no recollection of his murderous rampages as he's a werewolf in Cycle the Werewolf, but it seems like he does remember it in Silver Bullet. I think it's a very, unique dynamic to bring. Whereas I think they both have their positives. I'll say, I think they both kind of, bring their own devices, but I'll say one thing for Silver Bullet is the unveiling. If you go into this not knowing who the werewolf is, the unveiling of him gardening, and in the way that the camera comes and pans over to his bandaged eye is just absolute perfection. One of my favorite scenes.
So good.
Jane is just riding by unknowingly with her cart of cans, and then we as the audience are unveiled that it's Reverend Lowe. It's just in the beat of the sound that hits right then when we figure out that he's got the bandaged eye is just absolute perfection.
I couldn't agree with you more. And then the discovery of the bat
Yes,
and everything
Peacemaker.
like that. Oh, geez, it's
Not
so
John
good.
Cena.
Yeah, and it's honestly, I hate to say this. Every time I saw Peacemaker, all I could think of was Halloween Kills. Do you know that was coming? With the
No.
fucking no, okay, no, I get it. Peacemaker, I love it too. I love that show. I love that fucking movie. But yeah, no, dude, like that reveal too in and of itself is great. I love that whole scene. I mean, I used it in the corner there. That's the sequence. I'm like, that's if I'm gonna use Reverend Lowe, there's only one scene you can use.
Absolutely.
And it's got to be that reveal because yeah, it's so well done and it's so well executed. And it's just like it very much encapsulates that line that comes just a little bit later. I think it's literally right after where they're trying to convince Uncle Red to help them. And he's just like, I'm not here to what does he say? Like, I'm not here to play the Hardy Boys
Meet Reverend Werewolf.
meet Reverend Werewolf. Yeah, like such a great fucking line. It is such a good setup. But I think that, we could talk for hours just about the story. And I mean, we got real deep on the characters and the relationships and stuff. But I think that now we should probably move on to our next segment so we can talk about just the production behind Silver Bullet in the segment we like to call Behind the Mask. Alrighty, and now that we are in our production segment, a little behind the scenes, Luke, as we stated earlier, you have read the screenplay for Silver Bullet. I am familiar with the film, clearly. I am familiar with the source material, but I did not get a chance to read the screenplay, so you are doing a little extra credit for us on this podcast here, sir. So I'm going to throw it to you. Tell us about that screenplay. What are some of the big differences? What are some of the key things that stuck out to you that may or may not have translated to screen?
You touched on it at the very beginning with the Arnie Westrom scene where there's a thing that I know it's mentioned in the director commentary. It was mentioned, I think, a little bit in the producer commentary as well. Probably the biggest talking point in the screenplay is that the werewolf has some actual lines of dialogue in the original screenplay, which was absolutely, completely lost if you've watched Silver Bullet. It does not appear at all. But reading it, I think that the film was better for losing it. It just seems so out of place and I don't know, unnatural. But like looking at this screenplay as a whole and kind of what Stephen King brought as a werewolf dynamic, he was definitely trying to do something different, which I'm going to elaborate on, probably after we get through this here, and bring something, that we hadn't seen, I think, in werewolf films. And so I think that's why he added the dialogue. I don't necessarily know, just knowing the film that we got and seeing or reading what his intentions were with the screenplay, I feel we're better off not having the dialogue. But I also understand that he was trying to do something different. So, as we go into the opening here with Arnie singing the Rheingold beer song, the jingle, after the werewolf, cuts his head off, and he actually drinks the beer instead of
wow.
and instead of popping the bottle top, he bites into it and then drinks what's left of in the beer bottle, and then starts eating the glass as he's singing the Rheingold beer song. This also appears a few different times. You know what? I'm going to bring that up a little bit. I know you're kind of reacting to this. What are your thoughts on?
It's weird. Okay, so I thought a little cheeky. Maybe the werewolf would say a couple lines of dialogue here and there, almost in like a mocking sense, in a way, where it's just kind of it's tapping into that human side of itself, where it can kind of like I just picture it stomping away, kind of in a really growly, graspy, kind of hushed way, saying the Rheingold theme, more humming it to itself. But to hear that it's drinking, like taking a bite out of the beer can and washing that down and singing it, it's just that's a lot. I definitely think the film is better without it. I don't like. I'm okay with a little personality, a little bit sleeping through my werewolves, but that just seems like a bridge too far, if I must say.
Yeah. And and the dialogue doesn't end there. It does appear throughout the actual screenplay. One of the biggest, probably memorable scenes, at least for me, and I think for a lot of people who watch Silver Bullet, is when the townspeople go out into the woods and they're overcome by the fog, and the werewolf is underneath the fog attacking everybody. Now that scene plays a little bit different in the screenplay, whereas I think that the dialogue is actually in the screenplay where they say, they're backing away real slow, is they say real slow in there. During the killing, the werewolf mocks them by saying real slow underneath the fog. So he's like laughing and saying, real slow. And then taking them down one by one. And then this kind of sticks with the werewolf throughout the rest of the film, where he kind of repeats it several different times. One of the times is when we fast forwarding toward the end, when he rips the electrical wires off of the side of the house, and prior to this, when he gets the rocket in his eye, he says, "Marty, you bastard, I'm gonna kill you real slow." After Marty rides off in the Silver Bullet, after he pulls the rocket out. And then this is repeated again when he electrical wires out from the house. He says, "I'm going to kill you real slow." And then as he's dying, I believe he also repeats it, real slow, as he is dying in the living room. So it's one of those things where he kind of repeatedly used the verbalization with the werewolf, which, again, knowing the film that we've got, it doesn't really play that well. And trying to inject the actual dialogue with the werewolf in the actual film itself. So, for me, I understand what he's doing. It does bring a different dynamic. And this is where I want to kind of come for this. Where this was probably hindered by its runtime. It was never necessarily meant to be probably, this huge marketed film. And probably not the biggest budget. I'm not sure what the budget on this was, but I think it was hindered a little bit. Obviously, we'll get into creatures features and what became of the suit. But in the screenplay, Stephen King is the writer of Cycle the Werewolf. He's a screenwriter for the film, but he kind of gives leeway in terms of he's writing to not a couple of random people and trying to get his point across. He's writing to the director, he's writing to the producer, and he puts little notes in. Now, one of the things that he puts in, a little cheeky, I guess you would say, is when we are first introduced to the werewolf, he says, in a beast form, but not 100% beast form, it's someone we would recognize eventually, and we will kick ourselves for not being able to recognize him right now. And the same thing goes for when he is drinking from the pond when Marty's letting off the fireworks. He says, at this point, we would be able to recognize the werewolf, but he is hidden by the shadow, so we can't see his face. So what Stephen King's intention was here was that it was never going to be the beast like how we see in American Werewolf in London, where he's 100% the beast. He always wanted these, his intention was to have these transformations of, as we see in the actual film, as closer to the full moon, he gets wolfier. So I think Stephen King's intention throughout this entire thing was, we'd see him more as a half beast, half man, more so than on a full moon where we'd see him full-fledged beast. So I think he was kind of trying to bring that human-like quality that we wouldn't see in any other werewolves, not in The Howling, not in Wolfen, not in American Werewolf in London. It was supposed to be a differentiation of a werewolf, a different take. So I understand why the dialogue was there, and I would have loved it if the budget called for it, to see different versions of the werewolf. I think that could have really pushed this film over the edge in terms of being one of the most iconic werewolf films, to kind of bring that different dynamic that we don't get into any of these other werewolf films.
Sorry guys, my cat decided to join us. Yeah, no, that's very interesting. The dialogue I'm not completely on board with. I like the concept though of him not being 100% wolf, and just kind of seeing that slow build. In a couple of scenes, maybe some of the dialogue would work, maybe little bits here and there. But yeah, no, I like that though. I like a lot of those ideas. I think you're right. With maybe another 20 minutes, they could have expanded a little more into that and shown us some side of that. But again, I think you're right too, in a sense of I don't know if it was completely necessary. It makes me wonder if some of those ideas and effects, I know the scene was going to be in it throughout, kind of rear their head in the church sequence, where we see a lot of these half transformed werewolves and everything. And it's just one of those things where it's like, that's a beautiful sequence all in of its own. I would say that and the bridge sequence and probably the fog sequence. Would you say maybe the three most standout sequences in the entire film?
Yeah, I would say so as well. And again, I think Reverend Lowe's unveiling
Is great.
is up there, as well as seeing the Peacemaker Ballbat in the garage as well. And I'm glad you brought up the dream sequence, because I wanted to bring up it's a tidbit. It seems again a little more in depth as to what Stephen King wanted from the actual scene itself. When you read the screenplay, and with most screenplays, it's evident in Silver Bullet, there were a lot of scenes that were supposed to play out a little bit longer. There's extended dialogue, relationships, the relationship with the girl, Tammy, is more expanded upon. She doesn't leave abruptly right after her father's death. She stays there for a while and then eventually leaves. And you kind of see a little bit more dialogue between her and Marty. But bringing up the dream sequence for Reverend Lowe. Now that scene was supposed to play out a little more in depth. I think he has, from the organ, blood's boiling from the actual organs itself, like bubbling out of there. So it's supposed to be, there's more interplay with the werewolves coming out of the caskets and things. And one of the big things that I think you might get a kick out of, and I would have loved to see this play out on film, is that Reverend Lowe in the film just wakes up in a pool of sweat, with no, big scene that kind of puts a stamp on that. Now, what wakes him up from that dream in the original screenplay is, as he's opening up a door, on the other side of that door is a half zombie, half werewolf Brady. And he comes at him and then bites him in the neck. And that's what wakes him up. And I would have loved to see, especially looking at something like American Werewolf in London, where you see all the attack victims in their forms like that. I would have loved to have seen, like, especially in the 80s, to see a child that's half zombie attacked by a werewolf and half werewolf, all just on film. I think would have been such an intriguing perspective. It's something we don't see, and I would have even loved to have seen that, especially expanding upon that too. And I don't, they probably wouldn't have do it just because it'd be a little too close to American Werewolf to see these attack victims. Especially like to bring Brady back, I think would have just been something that would stick in everyone's head.
Absolutely. And that would have been amazing. I am totally on board with you there. To see an effect like that would have been crazy. Yeah, I like a lot of these ideas. I definitely, again, I have some issue with the dialogue stuff, but like, yeah, that's a really good addition I would have liked to have seen happen. But again, I think that they were pretty shackled because they were having a hard enough time with the werewolf itself. So, I'm sure there was room for cuts, and that had to be one of them. Because it surprises me with, Dino De Laurentiis being so adamant on gore and including more violence and stuff with the werewolf, that's a scene that they wouldn't keep in.
Yeah.
I feel like that would be it. But again, it's such an effective scene in and of itself to see all those people turning into werewolves that maybe they just felt like it was something they didn't need. Maybe it was a director's decision, because I know he was very adamant about keeping it more of a personal drama, sticking to the brother-sister storyline. And like some of his favorite stuff was, the stuff between Gary Busey and his sister. So, it's stuff like that he was really passionate about when I listened to his commentary. The werewolf stuff kind of seemed to be second to him. To answer a couple of your questions that you had during not knowing like the budget and stuff. The budget for this film was $7 million. Now its box office, this was considered a flop. But for some reason, I have no idea why. I tried to figure out where the discrepancy lies. There are people claiming that there's two reported numbers. There's a number that says that it made $5.4 million, which would be consistent with it being considered a flop. But then there's also 12.4 million was also a reported number. Trying to look into this, they say that some of this there's like a number that was reported to be inflated, I guess, or calculated incorrectly or something. But yeah, I could never get down specifically what caused that and why it was like, there was that discrepancy. But it was important enough that multiple sources I looked up for this decided to mention it.
Okay.
So, I don't know why. I don't think we'll ever get that cleared up at this point. But I do know for a fact that this movie was working with a $7 million budget, which isn't terrible for 85. I mean, especially for a movie that is, in the grand scheme of things, a bit smaller scale. So and one of the things that I also wanted to mention here that I know we talked a little bit before, and was the casting of Uncle Red. Originally, it was floated and heavily considered to have John Candy attached to the role, but apparently he wasn't interested and just turned down the script. So that's something where it's like, is that something that you could have seen him fill the role, or do you think that, I think we're both going to say that Gary Busey is our definitive Red, but is that something that, how do you feel the film would have even been received by audiences had John Candy taken the position?
In what was John Candy's kind of career trajectory at that point? I don't know what he had done.
Let me take a look while we're talking about that.
Because like looking at it, obviously the film that we got, where our default setting is going to be Gary Busey as Uncle Red, and I think none of us are going to argue that he does a exceptional job in what he brings to that role. I think it would have been interesting to see John Candy in that role. I think maybe, and to an extent, I think Gary Busey brings some comedy to the role, but he also brings an amount of seriousness to it. Now, I don't know if John Candy would have brought a lot of seriousness to the role. It would have been strictly more so comedic, and in the way that he kind of delivered everything. And again, we'll get into it performance wise, so I don't want to dive too deep into it. But when we talk about this film, and we've touched on it before, the amount of improvisation that Gary Busey brought to the role was something that I think is what makes Uncle Red such a standout. I don't know if we would have gotten that as if John Candy would have decided to actually pick up the role as Uncle Red. So I think it would have been in a different universe, an intriguing concept to just be able to see out on film. But I'm more than happy with Gary Busey.
I agree. He had at this point already starred in 1980. He had his role in Blues Brothers. Then he would follow that up with Stripes the following year. He did some voice work for Heavy Metal. He had the small role in National Lampoon's Vacation. So, and that was in 83. So like he was already pretty up there. He was in Splash, the Tom Hanks movie.
Yeah.
And then, Brewster's Millions was the same year that this came out, which I know is a pretty big Richard Pryor comedy for a lot of people.
Yep.
And then obviously he would have went on to be in Little Shop of Horrors, Spaceballs, and Planes, Trains, and Automobiles just 2 years later. So, I mean, he was pretty much, you'd want to say, in that prime John Candy comedy era. So, like, I think that this movie may have just been, I don't see him doing a smaller budget horror flick at that time. I don't know about that, especially after being in mega successes like the Blues Brothers, where he wasn't a major role, but he was in it nonetheless. You're working with Richard Pryor. I mean, like, yeah, it's kind of, I could see why he turned it down. But yeah, I mean, Gary Busey is absolutely the character actor that he killed the role. He crushed the role. I don't see anybody else really being a part of it. So one of the things I do want to mention was, and I kind of debate on. I'm going to actually save that for effects because that's going to be a big portion of it. One of the things that I did want to mention, though, here that I can go to is how much ad-libbing Gary Busey did. I know they talk about this in the commentary a lot, too, is that Gary Busey really came on set and was a total professional. And then he was able to just, really he asked the director if he could just roll with some of the scenes. And most of his dialogue you see in, especially like the sequences where right before he gives Marty the fireworks and everything like that, like the pork tartare kind of stuff. That's all just him. Like, that's not dialogue that he just threw in there. When he makes the bike and he falls, or the silver bullet, and Marty goes to take off, and how he falls over on the ground and he's acting all like stuff, like that's all him. That's all stuff that he added to the character. So it's, again, to someone like Gary Busey, who at this time we already established wasn't a mega star like he would go on to be. It was one of those things where it's like, he could have easily just, came in, punched a clock, called it a day. But no, he added things to this character. He really made Red that sympathetic uncle that I think we all wish we had.
And, since we're talking about it right now, reading the screenplay, and I remember us talking vividly about this in Swearwolves, Not Werewolves, where we talk about Gary Busey's improvisation throughout this film. And I remember specifically speaking about that scene where they're cooking, they're at the cookout, and they're talking, and Corey Haim's going to walk him to the car, and they're doing the handshake. And I'm like, that feels like an improvisation from Gary Busey, because it looks like it catches Corey Haim off guard when he's doing the handshake and all this stuff. And I'll say, reading the screenplay, when she says, I wish it could always be like this. And it really cuts off right there. So the rest of that stuff where he goes, I gotta go, that is not in the screenplay. So that must have just been complete improvisation, where he's like handshaking everybody, knocking things over, and where he's grabbing onto Marty's wheelchair and like pretending it's dragging him along. And then one of the other things, so minimal, but I think it adds so much to the personality of Uncle Red, is when he's leaving for the night and he says, watch out for the werewolf. And he howls as he's driving off. He's in the screenplay, it says, watch out for the werewolf. And Uncle, in the screenplay, it's still Uncle Al, but he said, and he just drives off. He does not howl. And I think for me, like, the howling sells that. You know what I mean? Where it's like, to an extent, I think he believes Marty a little bit, but it's still a big joke to him at that point. And then it kind of, with that turnaround later on in the film where he 100% believes it when he sees it. I think, adding that howl is something so minimal, but I think it's showing how great of an actor that he really is.
Absolutely. And, I mean, this is one of those things where, it takes a special actor to really see through the material and actually have that passion to want to grow even the smallest character, to its fullest extent. I mean, we've been singing his praises. I'm sure we'll continue to as the podcast goes on here. But one of the last things I wanted to touch on, at least on my side of behind the scenes before we get moving on, is the whole aspect here of something that I didn't even know until I started looking into this. But apparently, Don Coscarellis, as we know him from Bubba Hotep and Phantasm and things, was originally signed on and shot footage for Silver Bullet. And it was due to him and Dino De Laurentiis and the delays with the Werewolf and everything going on behind the scenes. It was a mess that he stepped away. So it's kind of mind-blowing that we have kind of an infamous, at least the horror fans, a very infamous horror director. Stepping behind the camera, picking up a Stephen King property, and then just stepping away from everything and just saying fuck it, like I'm gonna go do something else. Kind of amazing. That's what we got with it, and I was very shocked to read his name come up as far as the original director, and to know that they got as far as through post-production into shooting. And I believe there are a couple of his original shots, like things he shot in the film, still alive in this movie. I couldn't figure out what exactly those were, but people have attested that some of his footage has made it into the film.
And because I had read that as well, and I was a little perplexed because they said, I think there's something citing that he'd filmed a lot of the stuff that was not in regards to the werewolf, but to me that seems like something that doesn't compute, because was his resignation from the film because of the look of the werewolf?
It was the look, in the sense that he wanted to keep the werewolf more in shadow. And again, like I said, Dino De Laurentiis wanted his werewolf on screen and a lot more gore, as to where he wanted the werewolf to be more hidden through most of it. I think now that you tell me this information about, how there were potentially going to be phases with Stephen King, I think that he was probably more on board for that interpretation of it.
Yeah, and I think I would have been intrigued to see his interpretation, being on board with something like a Phantasm, and then what we got, Bubba Hotep. I think he's got that understanding, especially of adding a little bit of some comedy into a horror movie. I think maybe we would have gotten something if he was on board with something maybe like, a zombified werewolf version of Brady, to kind of lean a little more into horror, and to kind of give, horror fans, something to kind of, enjoy, and instead of, and I think the story itself is great in terms of, you need that human story, but I think maybe we would have gotten a little extra gore that way around. But I don't know if that was the contention of De Laurentiis wanting more gore and him not. I don't know exactly what that film would have looked like then. In more of a thriller than horror. I don't know.
It would have been interesting, and it would have been very different from what we got. I think, at least on the horror side of it, it seemed like they were very in tune with the emotional aspects of the brother-sister relationship and the family. So yeah, I definitely agree with you that I don't know what this movie would have came out looking like had we continued on with Don Coscarelli's.
That would be an interview that I would love to land. If we ever talk to him, it would be like in-depth Silver Bullet. What happened?
Just please tell us. He's like, I've got all these other movies, guys. Like, what's up with that? Nope. Just sorry. We want to talk about the months long work he did on Silver Bullet. I don't know if it was a month, but
yeah,
probably could have been more than that. But yeah, no, that would be amazing. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much everything that I have on my side of things for behind the scenes. Do you have anything else that you want to touch on?
I listened to the producer commentary, and there wasn't really a lot of in-depth things that were being uncovered there. The only really takeaway from that commentary is that Silver Bullet was one of those films that was one of the catalysts into bringing the film industry to North Carolina, as a lot of this was filmed in, I think, the Wilmington area. The deciding factor here was, they had put out an expansion of trying to find a good place to film that would look like Tarkers Mills, and they couldn't find it. And then finally, I believe the story goes that Dino De Laurentiis saw the cover of I think a plantation they had said in North Carolina, and I think it was where Firestarter was, and
yes.
Then that's where they used for Firestarter, and then they went back and used some of it for Silver Bullet, and then things like what Cat's Eye was there, and it really brought a lot of Stephen King properties, a lot of different things into Wilmington, and the film industry there started booming. Now, I think it will be worth it. If we can put a pin in this, to really deep dive into De Laurentiis' production company, and it eventually goes bankrupt in the late 80s. And then, there's still things filmed in Wilmington, North Carolina. I think that the film industry is starting to come back there. I know a lot of people moved to Georgia for filming, in terms of, kind of getting those
I believe they
tax breaks.
shot the David Gordon Green Halloween films in North Carolina.
There it is. It's back and booming. There it is. So, I Silver Bullet again was one of the big catalysts there, but other than that, there wasn't really too much to uncover in that commentary. But it's one of those interesting things where we get filming sometimes in Ohio for different films. Nothing too extensive. I mean, sometimes we do, but I don't think anything as of too recently. But I think it's very interesting, especially looking at just a handful of Stephen King horror films were responsible for kind of starting the film industry in North Carolina.
Mm-hmm. Just double check. Yeah, those are actually shot in South Carolina, but one of the Carolinas. This was definitely, he did bring a lot of the industry to North Carolina, for sure. You can definitely credit him with that as far as Dino goes. Yeah, it's kind of amazing what you can double for these northern states. It's like all because of tax breaks and everything. And to jump on your actual talk about shooting in Ohio before we move on. I don't know if I think I mentioned it on Sunday Scaries. I may have not mentioned it yet, but apparently, and I don't think it's going to happen now, but we were supposed to have Blade shooting just down the street from me. So that sucks, but oh well. I was going to try to be in that, but we'll see. Maybe the writer's strike will get resolved next week and they'll pay those people what they deserve. But anyway, why don't we move on to our next segment where we talk about the cast? I know we've said a lot about a lot of people, but why don't we go through it again and talk a little bit more in depth with everybody's a suspect.
Prom night, they save time. There's a formula to it. A very simple formula. Everybody's a suspect.
Alrighty, and yes, this brings us to our cast and crew segment where we're going to discuss, everybody. Not everybody, I wish we could, but unfortunately, we don't have all the information we can get on every single actor in the film. But we're going to talk about some of the fantastic members of the crew. We've already talked about Gary Busey, Everett McGill, Corey Haim to an extent. But we are going to discuss a couple of the side characters who pop up in this film because there are quite a few interesting faces. The first one that I want to bring up as somebody that, I was surprised to realize who I was looking at, even though I'd seen this movie 100 times, is Terry O'Quinn, who is famous for, obviously, for a lot of you people who aren't familiar with The Stepfather, he is John Locke in Lost. So some of you guys will probably remember that. But yes, he is also Jerry Blake in the Stepfather films. So that is something that I was pretty surprised when it all kind of clicked on like who the hell I was looking at. But yeah, he plays Sheriff Joe Howler. So I think he does a good job. It's very interesting to see him as a good guy in a sense in this, because he's not so much a good guy in the Stepfather films, not at all. But it was very, very interesting to see him kind of take the other step and be, on the other side of things for once.
Yeah, and obviously it in the 80s still holds true today with Stranger Things. A sheriff is a staple in any kind of horror-centric whodunit small town film. And I think Terry O'Quinn absolutely perfect. He has got the look to be a believable sheriff. And it's one of those things where sometimes they try to create this likable character, but you just end up disliking them. I think Sheriff Howler is just, you believe that he's doing the best that he can and that he wants to solve these things. Now, in the screenplay, they do I will say it feels like the Brady death hits a little more home. There's a little bit more dialogue that they keep coming back to of him, saying that that's really stuck with him and he's a little more disheveled. Here they kind of played him a little more straight laced and kind of out of the way for a lot of things. But I like every time we come back to him. I love that he's cursing at people on the phone, and then the interplay that we have with the townspeople, especially when they're all going out to hunt down the werewolf, and Reverend Los trying to stop them, where sheriff just saying, "This is the community spirit that you're talking about." You can really sense that he's fed up. And then I think the moment that really ends for me is when Uncle Red is just explaining all this stuff to him, and he shouldn't believe any of it, but he's like, "Do you believe it?" And then he says, "Well, let me just say that I think Reverend Lowe should be checked out." And he said, "That can be arranged." And you can tell that he wants to do his job, even if he's not going to disregard anything that anyone brings to him. He's always going to go that extra mile to check out. And that leads to his demise, but he was doing his job. So it's like, I think they really did create a lovable sheriff in a sense, even if he's not the kind of focus that we're used to in these types of films.
No, I agree. And I think that he does a very good job of filling that role. Again, it's something where like you said, Stranger Things brings it back. Any kind of 80s horror, you got to have a good sheriff. And I think he does a bang up job. And especially for Stephen King property sheriffs, like, there are a medley of them from Misery all the way down that we get introduced to. But it's one of those things where this is definitely one that sticks out to me. And I got to say, I think Terry O'Quinn does a fantastic job. I think that he's definitely got a lot of heart to it. It sucks when he gets cornered in the can storage area or whatever, where he meets his end. It always hurts a little bit because it's like, again, he is fed up. It's interesting that his counterpart in the book is also very fed up. He meets his demise in a very different way.
Yeah.
One of the more sudden elements in the book, because he's kind of ranting to everybody. Is it in the barber shop or is it the bar in the book? I think it's the barber shop.
I can't remember. I think it is a barber shop. I know he's got a beer in his, that's what,
in his car.
Yeah, and it's like, and I think the Cycle the Werewolf portrays maybe a little less likable constable.
Oh yeah, he's more of a dick in that.
Yeah, whereas
I don't even know if that's the sheriff. It might even just be a deputy at that point, but it is his direct counterpart.
Yeah.
But when he like gets his face ripped off in the story, it's very abrupt. It very much just
great artwork. Sorry.
To him. It's fantastic artwork. Yes, all of it's fantastic artwork.
Yeah.
Bernie Wrightson, great job. I want some of that stuff like in posters on my wall. Like, like if you could have like all the square tiles in one frame, like that'd be amazing. But
like lobby cards.
Yes. All right, anyway, back to it. But yeah, no, he does they do a great job with that. And I think that him playing up the more friendly side, the more neighborly side of it is definitely the way I prefer to have my sheriff in the story. Another person who doesn't have a really giant career as far as any leading roles, but someone that always sticks out to me is Kent Broadhurst as Herb Kincaid. So it's one of those things where he is some of the more famous moments in the story here, obviously with his son Brady being attacked and killed and everything. He's got some of the things that really incite the riots and the violence and everything, or not riots, but the hunting of the werewolf. He's kind of the one to incite it all. So he does a really good job and it's very memorable.
And you were talking about memorable scenes, and I'll tell you what, if there is one piece of imagery that that I could show someone for Silver Bullet, would be what's right above you in this, is that kite covered in blood. Mm-hmm. I think Sheriff Holler holding that kite while reciting a prayer is just something that absolutely sticks with me. And then one of the things in the producer commentary, and I'll bring this up, I forgot about it, is that And again, this goes back into I think the intention of it was that they were going to show Brady, the gore, and they didn't. And that actor, I'm sorry, his name's escaping me. What was his name?
For his father,
Yes.
Kent Broadhurst.
Said just leave the camera on me and I'll do a reaction for it. And that's what they use for it. And it's like that really sells it 100%. For me, I think it's more terrifying I think a lot of people are in this group of not seeing the aftermath of what happened to Brady. Again, it's kind of, not have that effect is, especially when they wanted to lean more into horror and gore, is kind of, weird to me. But, I think the film's better for just seeing blood drenched, that yellow kite, and then Kent Broadhurst performance as seeing his boy Brady. And again, I think it was I think it's in the screenplay, and they cut it off where he's more so laughing and making a joke that it'll be the most inexpensive funeral that Tarkers Mills has ever seen, because the only thing that is left is Brady's feet in his shoes, and that's the only thing that we're going to be burying. And I like that they cut it off of just this more serious reaction instead of making a joke. And I'm going to bring that up again. I'm assuming you're probably going to bring up another side character eventually that I want to talk about. But that scene is just absolutely memorable for his performance and just the way they keep the camera on him.
Feel free, go ahead.
One of the ones, again, you were talking about most memorable scenes, and this one slipped my mind. The creation of the silver bullet. And the actor there that plays, I believe his name is Mac. Let me see. Conrad McLaurin, I believe is the name of the gunsmith, I guess we call him. The creation of the silver bullet, and just the way he brings the seriousness there. And in the screenplay, it's when at the very end, and I'm sure we'll get into it here, where he says, Uncle Red says, what are we going to use a silver bullet for anyway? And he looks at him very serious in his eye and says, how about a werewolf? And the delivery of that line, it just makes you, and they talk about it in the producer commentary, where it makes you think that maybe he's had a run-in with a werewolf at some point in Tarkers Mills. And in the screenplay, it's delivered more so jokingly of, how about a werewolf? And then he goes, happy Halloween. And like, that's how it's the original intent for it was. And I don't know if it was changed by the actor himself or what, but the seriousness that he brings to there makes you wonder what exactly this guy's story is. And I think that seriousness just sells that scene so well, from the creation of the bullet to Uncle Red delivering, what are we going to do with a silver bullet anyway? And the way he just instantly delivers that line very seriously makes that scene so memorable as well.
I agree. I love that scene especially. I think it's one of my favorites in the film too. I have a lot of favorite scenes, obviously, like you do. I think the whole film is a favorite scene, but it's one of those things where I absolutely adore that. But let's get into the heavy hitters. Obviously, we talked a little bit about all our four main leads here, but I think if we could talk about Corey Haim and Megan Follows again, they're great child actors. They both did a wonderful job. I don't know if Megan Follows has done anything really that I would know her from. I'm looking through her filmography now. It seems like she's done a lot of TV over the last few years or so. So yeah, I don't see a lot of feature film work, but definitely a steady career in television for her. But I thought she did a wonderful job. Again, they have a lot of very tender moments together. I think that she's definitely got, again, one of the best scenes in the film, which is the reveal for obviously Reverend Lowe being the werewolf. You get a lot of that. And, her going through the town and just looking to see who's missing an eye is one of the more iconic scenes in the film that always sticks out to me.
Yeah, and she really brings that believable dynamic between a brother and a sister, of a lovable annoyance where she loves her brother but is always annoyed by any actions that he does. And you can tell that she loves him. It's not like the straight up hatred that she has for him. Even, I go back to that initial scene where she's annoyed by, the fake the snake with Brady and Marty, and dislikes him and calls him a booger all the time. But then when he brings the money in to get the pantyhose, she's easily able to forgive him, and then they find themselves right back at being at odds, but then they are, best friends again, especially when he delivers that line of, I got to tell you something, but, no one, you're not going to believe me. And then she goes, he told me something so unbelievable, but I believed him. It's just like the dynamic that those two actors bring to those characters sells you that that brother sister dynamic. And again, the family unit, which is a big selling point in Silver Bullet.
Absolutely. And then Corey Haim, I mean, seriously, very upsetting. I know they talk about it quite a bit in the director commentary of, where things kind of ended off for him in his life. But I mean, what an actor. I mean, seriously, between this and Lost Boys alone, you could say that he's one of the more memorable people. But I mean, he went on to have a pretty illustrious career, especially if you were a kid growing up in the 80s and things like that. Because I mean, of course, like License to Drive and stuff like that was a big deal for a lot of people. But it's one of those things where this will always be a film. Like I said, this and Lost Boys, I think, are always going to be my definitive Corey Haim performances.
Yeah, and me as well. I think what a double feature Silver Bullet and Lost Boys are in the horror community, and it's just like looking at his film career. I think he was maybe more so ahead of his time, where we talk about you kind of get pigeonholed in a sense, where the two Coreys was such a big thing in the 80s, where I don't think there was much left in the tank in the 90s. No one really, you almost become radioactive in a sense, where, oh yeah, he's one of those kids from the two Coreys. We're not going to cast him in anything else. And I think Silver Bullet really shows his range, where, he's not just this pop culture icon. This is way before that. And you look at something like Lucas, and then also Silver Bullet, where he does show this serious range that you knew that there was a great actor inside of him. And I don't think you necessarily got that opportunity leaving the 80s and going into the 90s and the 2000s, where he was never able to, capitalize on what a great actor he could have been. It just became such a 80s pop culture novelty in a sense that no one wanted to give him those opportunities later in life. But I think Silver Bullet, I get watching him sitting outside the fence and watching the kids play baseball. He really sells it with just facials alone of being able to see something that he can't do. So, I mean, Corey Haim, again, brings so much to that Marty Coleslaw character. Character. It's just like one of those ones where he would fit right in with, the kids of Stranger Things or something like that, where he's just a lovable central character.
I agree. And it's one of those things where for me, yeah, I think that Corey Haim is one of those people that will always forever be, the younger version of himself, I guess, just because of how I grew up with him and everything, and the media that I consume with him in it. But again, it is one of those things I got to reflect on, where we could be sitting had things gone a little differently for his life, of just like, showing up at cons and things, getting to possibly interview him and hear stories about the production of this film from his perspective, and other things, and seeing just what kind of work he would do. Maybe he would have had a renaissance, as we've seen with a lot of actors in recent years, maybe through TV or something like that. I would have been very curious to see where that goes. And then kind of touching again, and then we'll move on to our next segment here. Everett McGill and Gary Busey, obviously we've talked about them quite a bit. Gary Busey, I think we've talked about a lot, so I think maybe we'll give this a little bit more attention to Everett McGill. But him as Reverend Lowe, again, we talk about it in the story segment of just playing that character who uses religion to justify his own actions, but also, again, playing that line of just like, the first half of the story just seems like such a do-gooder, your standard typical priest. And then to find out that he's the beast all along, it is one of those things where it's like, it'll always stick with me, that scene of the reveal there. And I just think that he brings a lot of, again, that meekness to the character at first, of being very much just that kind of average, I'm just trying to be the good town priest. But then when that switch up happens and we all know he's the bad guy, and we see that throughout the story, and just how he's like, on the bridge with, Marty and everything, and just the intimidation factor he brings to it. It's just like, again, what a performance. Seriously. Like one of those ones where it's like, I absolutely would love to, see him kind of come back to do something like this, where he kind of has another role where he gets into it like that.
Yeah, I mean, he could have really had some deep roots in the horror realm if he really wanted to. Just Silver Bullet is a complete list of exceptional casting from beginning to end, from its minute characters to even the bigger characters, because the Reverend Lowe character, again, doesn't have much to it because of the device the story wants to use. You almost want to use him as a forgettable character for some of it because he is, the main villain. And it's more so a whodunit. But like the scenes that he has, especially toward the end when he flips that switch and we know he's the werewolf. I go back to thinking of him trying to chase down Marty, and him all up on the steering wheel, just like driving real fast. Is just he absolutely sells that stuff, and he is able to switch it not just on appearance alone, but his actions. He is a true madman, a maniac, even not as a werewolf. But you can see, even though he isn't transformed into the werewolf, it is starting to bleed into his consciousness as a human being. And I think, you need a great actor to do that, no matter how minute the role is and how little screen time he does get. He just sells it so well as that main villain.
I agree. I do enjoy his performance in this quite a bit. And yeah, I enjoy a lot of performances in this movie. I enjoy this movie. So why don't we take it to the part you guys have probably all been waiting for, and we'll move into creatures features. And yes, this is our special effects segment where we like to get into the nitty gritty of what it took to bring these marvelous monsters to screen. Now, Silver Bullet, as we've kind of hinted and stated early on, has a lot of contention. When it comes to the fans, when it comes to the people behind the film, the werewolf was a problem. And we'll get into that here in a minute, but to the fans, this movie has been criticized to have a very derpy, bear-looking werewolf in it. And if you look at the beautiful artwork behind us, that is not a great representation of the werewolf. And I got to say, if you look at the artwork in the book for Cycle of the werewolf looks nothing like that. It does, in some shots, I should say, look a little goofy. Luke, how do you feel about the werewolf? Did you feel odd about it when you first saw it when you were younger, or was it just one of those things like me where you just saw a werewolf movie and you didn't really pay too much attention? You were just sucked into the story.
Yeah, for me, it didn't matter what the werewolf looked like initially when I had watched it. It was just, oh my gosh, I'm watching a werewolf movie, and the tension that they had brought there. For me, as a kid, I think what stuck out more so in my head was when he is stalking Marty on the bridge and his hands are out, the claws are out. I think more so that is what stuck with me, is more scary than actually seeing the werewolf's face or anything like that. So as a kid, it didn't really bother me. It was just like, oh, it's a werewolf movie. So you don't pay too much to the effects. As you get older and you start kind of analyzing everything, you're like, well, that effect does not hold up at all. And again, that's one of the things where wasn't there a contention as to what the werewolf should look like on set, and it was, I guess if we're looking at this, and maybe the intention was to have these different phases of what the werewolf would look like as he gets wolfier as the full moon approaches. maybe they did want this more so human form of looking like a man more so than a big beastly figure. But again, you know, you look at the artwork of Cycle the Werewolf, and that stuff shows a big hulking wolf. So I'm always curious to what the initial intention was going into Silver Bullet before we actually got into production of anything.
Yeah, and you know, it is something where only the people behind the scenes in the effects houses would have been able to tell us really what they were told to do when it came to this. I think that, like, just looking at it in general, this definitely is a suit and an effect that does play better in the darkness. I do point to the sequence where the werewolf is watching Marty from across the bridge. It looks great. It looks really good in that scene. And then it's really at the end of the film where I think it looks its weakest,
Yep.
when it's in all that direct light and it's doing all the facial reactions and stuff. You know, that stuff is tough. I mean, that's really hard to pull off without really convincing effects. And you know, it sucks because the film was, again, over halfway shot before they were even able to get the werewolf on set. So they were shooting everything but these werewolf scenes where they needed it. And you know, by the time they got it, they were so deep into production, there's nothing they could do. And you know, I mean, it just really plagued the movie from start to finish, because again, Dino wanted more werewolf on screen, more violence, more blood, but they did not deliver, and he was very upset with how they handled it, and to the point where a lot of people behind the scenes like to say that he kind of took over, kind of shepherded in his own image how to shape the film, which again hurt it, because I think, again, the intent was to leave the werewolf a little bit more in the shadows and not show him so much, but because Dino wanted to be up there with American Werewolf in London and The Howling and stuff, which had these wonderful effects, he was like, I want to show my werewolf, when that's really just not what they got, you know? And again, you bring up these elements of it kind of being a little bit more man-like in the script. It seems like there were a lot of people, a lot of cooks in the kitchen with a lot of different ideas. That's
Yeah.
really where I can come to the conclusion here.
Yeah, and you know, looking at this film and kind of quarterbacking on it and thinking what you could have done here, I think they do a great, a great concept of hiding the werewolf for the most part. Like you said, at the end, once it comes through the wall and it's visually right there in front of you, is really where it hurts it the most. But I think, like, looking at this film and the way that they do the close-ups and in the quick shots and things like that, and not showing it in the fog, I think it was really well done to kind of conceal it. Now, I think, like, if you have all the money in the world and we have our creative choices here, I think it would have been interesting to do, like, a more slender wolf as throughout the film, you know, non a full moon, as you know, as we're getting wolfier, and then, you know, by the end of it and he comes through that wall, if we get like a werewolf like in Bad Moon or something like that, and it's just this big hulking figure because he's at his wolfiest at that point and there is no man left. I think that would have been an interesting transition to kind of see this different stages of the wolf. Now, one of the things I wanted to bring up that I had was kind of saving, because I knew we were going to talk about the werewolf, and you know, as we do see it, what do we see? We see it very quick cuts. And then at the end, we see it, you know, full-fledged wolf. Now, in the screenplay, there is a part in there as he's saying real slow and kind of, we're doing a POV shot of him going through the fog and taking down these people. Now, there is a point in there where there are still some townspeople left, and the unveiling of the wolf is he comes up from the fog and he is covered in gore. And that's when he starts more so taking people. And that's when we get our big first look at this wolf. Now, I think that would have been also very intriguing if that was a full moon and he's, again, at his wolfiest at that point, and we just get this giant hulking figure of a wolf come out from the, and he could still be in a silhouette, but just absolutely drenched in viscera, gore, and everything like that. So it's kind of a different version. I think that would have been a great piece of imagery that we could have gotten from this film.
No, I actually think that would have been very effective. And you know, for me, And I think for people going into this film, it's always going to be a point of contention, the werewolf. But I think that overall, it is a very unique look. And it is something that, as somebody who is a fan of this, and I don't know if somebody who's just discovering this for the first time might think it's ridiculous or whatnot, but I honestly, I do love the look of it. I have said, as I do on most podcasts, I'd like a NECA figure of it. If I can get, the Kessler Wolf, I think we can get that, just because it is one of those things where it's like, it is so unique. There aren't many werewolves that look like it for good reasons and bad. But it's one of those things where it's like just the iconic imagery of the bottle rocket in the eye and all that stuff. It really sets itself apart from other werewolves and other werewolf tales. And I think the claws look really nice. Again, everything on the werewolf looks good other than really the face. So it's kind of one of those things where it's just kind of like, if they would have retooled some things, had some more time to go back at it, make it look a little wolfier, like you say, I think that they could have really knocked it out of the park. But I mean, for me, it's not a deal breaker at all. Again, it could just be bias from enjoying the movie so much and growing up with it. But I think overall, I think a lot of people can forgive it because there's a lot of really great elements at play here.
Yeah. And, I've learned to accept it. It doesn't take me out of the film. I think the film is great enough that even if it doesn't have a stellar werewolf effect, it doesn't take anything away from the actual story itself. But one of the things, like when Sheriff Howler is in the garage and we kind of see that transformation a little bit, I think is a great effective transformation.
It is a good effect. Even in the church, they're great effects.
Yep. So, overall, it doesn't take me out. I think, it would have been great to have a perfect werewolf in this film. It would have amplified my love even more if that's even possible. But it doesn't take me out. It is what it is, especially when you're shooting and not knowing what the werewolf's going to look like. By that time, you already got the suit. You're committed to the film. You just kind of got to fill in the blanks and get the film out there because, I mean, what else can you do, So overall, I don't think it kills the film at all. I understand people's criticism of it, but, for me, everything else, all the positives in this film, there's one little negative like that's not going to kill it for me.
I agree. Alrighty. Well, I think that about wraps us up for our special effects segment. So why don't we bring her on home in the final segment, which we like to call It's Only a Movie.
Action to play this theater. This picture, truly one of the most unusual ever filmed, contains scenes which under no circumstances should be viewed by anyone with a heart condition or anyone who is easily upset.
To avoid fainting, keep repeating. It's only a movie. Only a movie. Only a movie.
And yes, this is where we're going to bring it on home. We're going to discuss not only the legacy of Silver Bullet, but of course, where we think something like Silver Bullet and Cycle of the Werewolf could fit in the future. Now, before we get into that, I just want to talk about just, again, the legacy of this movie. Give us the wrap up. Luke, where do you think that Silver Bullet stands now? Where do you think it'll stand in the future? And what are your hopes for people who are just discovering this movie?
Like looking at this film, I think at the time it was probably more so overlooked, just because it wasn't, probably like it was rated R. It wasn't like the main big film coming out of the year. But looking at it, it's got a Scream Factory release. I think a lot of people are starting to find this film. I think it's still in its infancy of like a resurgence, though. I think a lot of people are figuring out how good of a werewolf film this is in a world of very little werewolf films, especially back then in current times. They're really more so misses than hits. But this one, I think, great storytelling. I think this one has the DNA of something like a Stranger Things, that I could easily see that was built from the ground, and to say, okay, this was an inspiration for a lot of the things that we're getting nowadays with these small town stories with kids and going against a threat, a supernatural threat, or something like that. Silver Bullet verbatim is that type of story. I mean, you can go back. There's so much nostalgia to be had here. It's great storytelling. Overall, I think right now a lot of people are figuring out how great this film is, and I think it's only going to get bigger from here.
You can only hope so. And, for me, this again is a very special movie to me because not only was it my mother's one of her favorites, it's a movie that, again, I'll always think about that time at the hotel where I made that mental check mark and saw that first sequence with Marty and the werewolf on the bridge and the iconic, bottle rocket in the eye. I'll always think about Gary Busey's performance. I'll always think about just Everett McGill and just, again, that intensity. And as I got older, starting to kind of realize him using, the religious subtext of everything to justify his actions. And again, I will always find myself going back and rereading or listening, especially now that I have that audio drama, listening to Cycle of the Werewolf, to which this is based on. So, it's a beautiful pairing. It's a wonderful Stephen King adaptation, a wonderful Stephen King story, and one that, I do hope more people find as time goes on, and one that I think will always be in my top 3 werewolf films of all time for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, catch me on a different day, and this could be my favorite werewolf movie of all time. It's one of those ones, like I explained at the very beginning. I love American Werewolf in London, but I easily watch Silver Bullet a handful more times before I turn on American Werewolf, just because of how digestible it is and how much of a fun ride that we get throughout this film. So, I love this as a kid. It still stands true today. It's a film that I'm always going to go back to. I love that I own the Scream Factory edition of this because, to be able to get it in that high quality film, I couldn't ask for more unless we get a 4K, and then I will be buying that.
I guarantee you after we post this, because they have literally been upgrading like their entire catalog to 4K in like bursts. Like we just got the Burning and everything coming now in July. I guarantee you we're going to be getting this shortly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll be there to buy it. I hope that it's one of the ones that they're like, let's do the poster again. Let's do this. I'll buy that fucking edition any day.
100%.
Oh God, to own this artwork, like I can't believe that I didn't get it when it first came out and I missed that,
They're like, let's throw in an Uncle Red NECA figure.
Dude, you have no idea. I'd buy like 7. My wife would divorce me. But yes, one of the pieces I wanted to discuss before we, sign off, call it a day, close the book for now on Silver Bullet. I wanted to discuss the potential, with us having the context of Cycle of the Werewolf, this movie being remade, and whether that be a TV show or again just a cinematic presentation, because of, again, we've since about 2017 we've really been living through a Stephen King resurgence that does not seem to want to quit, no matter what the outcome is, whether you have It Chapter 1 or you have Firestarter, quality wise. Luke, do you think that Silver Bullet is one that's going to get revisited at some point, whether we do it or not?
I hope it does. To be honest, this one, I think we sit here in 2023 and we still talk about how great werewolf films are few and far between. They seem to be such a hard concept to nail down for some reason. I think Cycle the Werewolf could easily be translated for modern times. For me, if you're asking what I would love to see, I would love to see if we do a 12 episode, again, each one is a different Cycle of the Werewolf. That way we can get our holiday horrors. We can get every different thing. I think you sprinkle Marty in at the very beginning, not necessarily how it goes through the actual book itself, but we sprinkle Marty in, but each episode is townsperson's story, all culminating into their death, except for when we get to Marty, and then he's still that character throughout until we get to that 12th episode and we get that big culmination there. That way we can develop a little more of Reverend Lowe throughout those 12 episodes as well, and kind of get more so that the townspeople in on all the fun as well. So, I mean, I think whether it is a series like that or we bundle it back up into a feature film, I'm going to be on board either way. I think there's a ton of potential here with the characters, the concept. I think there is still a lot to dive deep into Cycle the Werewolf.
I agree. And I definitely have given it some thoughts. I mean, obviously we hinted towards it and we're not going to get into details, but this movie is a basis for, a story that Luke and I have written. I believe we started out talking about this being a remake, and then it kind of grew from there. So it's one of those things where it's like it definitely has crossed our minds on how we'd execute it, and then went on to become its own thing. But I still think there is room on the table, especially like you said, in a world where we're waiting for that great werewolf resurgence again, like we had in the 80s here, to really get us there. And some of the things that I've thought of, I like to think of casting and things like that ahead of time. This is one that I'm not going to say that I'm going to cast a director, because I'm saying it now. Once our filmmaking career takes off, if they ever hit us with, we want to do a Stephen King movie, what do you want to do? We're going to say Silver Bullet. I mean, obviously, but it's one of those things where it's like, I think that we need to be the ones to bring this to screen, very selfishly. So if you think that I'm being pompous, go ahead and put it in the comments. But if I had to cast anybody in this film, it's not Red, it's not Marty, it's Reverend Lowe. Do you have any inkling of who I might choose to play Reverend Lowe? He's not a giant name actor.
I don't know.
Okay. He has already played a priest or a father, however you want to say it, in a reverend in one piece of media that we both enjoy. But I'm going to say Hamish Linklater from Midnight Mass as Reverend Lowe.
You can't go wrong. Are you saying Mike Flanagan should direct?
No, I'm saying
I'm
we
kidding.
direct and we steal Mike Flanagan's cast.
Hey, let's do
it. Yeah, no, I think that would be just awesome. If we are going to steal more cast members from him, maybe Robert Longstreet from as Uncle Red.
That would, yeah, I think that would be perfect casting, to be honest.
There we go.
Those two, I think those two would work perfect, to be honest. 100%. I'm on board.
Yeah, I think if we casted both of them, they'd be like, well, Mike Flanagan's not directing, so sorry, guys, we can't do it. I don't know. Maybe we need to interview him and just be like, hey, even if we don't get to do this, can you just make this happen for us, please? Can you promise us, Mike Flanagan, us guys who, you just met? And it's like that.
We'll make a blood pact during the interview.
Yes, but yeah, I definitely think this is ripe for a remake. I definitely think that whether, like you said, a series, a film, either way, I think that there's definitely more attention to detail, a better werewolf costume, practical, that you could bring to the screen. I think that there is some potential here. But if it never happens, I'm still in love and happy with the movie that we have.
Absolutely.
And I absolutely think that, again, said it at the start, if you have not seen Silver Bullet, please go check it out. It is one of the best. Obviously, like I said earlier, one of the top 3 werewolf films, in my opinion.
Yeah. I'm absolutely happy with the Silver Bullet that we did get. I think at some point down the road, we're going to see some sort of remake for this one, because obviously Stephen King's having a resurgence now. There's a lot of hot properties out there, and if we're doing Firestarter, why the hell not to do Cycle the Werewolf one more time around? So I'm still going to hold out hope for that. I think we're still in search for the next great werewolf film. But until then, I'll watch The Cursed, and then I'll watch Silver Bullet. So, I think there's a lot more great werewolf stories out there. Cycle the Werewolf and Silver Bullet just are the tip of the iceberg, and just watching this film will get you inspired to create your own werewolf property.
I completely agree. But alrighty, guys, I think that's going to wrap us up here for Silver Bullet. This is going to clock in at a pretty decently long episode for us. So,
Is this the longest episode that we've done?
No, this will not be. Because obviously, there are some things I have to edit, some breaking points, but also we have still Halloween. I think the 18 and kills. It's like 3.5 hours. Like, there's no way we're going to top that for a while. Yes, this has been a lot of fun. I'm really happy we got to sit back down and do another episode. We are going to get back on the train, make sure that we're getting you guys these episodes monthly. Like we said, we just had a lot of stuff on the channel coming up. So thank you guys for being present for that. Thank you for putting up with it. If you are a diehard listener to just the podcast episodes, we hope that this scratches your itch for a little while. And yeah, we do have a lot of great stuff coming to the channel, of course. We've got, reviews coming up. We've got essays that we're in the mix of making. And, of course, more and more great stuff on the horizon. And, yeah, I just cannot wait to give it to you. So.
Yeah. Absolutely therapeutic to get back in the saddle here and do a big podcast like this and just dissect a film in long form like this. I'm excited for what the next year is going to hold for us. Like Dylan said, a lot more to come, a lot more unique things coming to the channel to just hop up the uniqueness of SplatterCast. But, a big thank you to everyone who's listening, watching our stuff, and along for the ride. We raise our SplatterCast mugs to you. Thank you for sticking with us and bringing us those views and all your comments and just intriguing and notes that you give us. I'm losing my train of thought, but it's just overwhelming to think we're still here after a year. We started this whole thing. A big thank you to everybody, and here's to another year of SplatterCast.
Absolutely. And thank you guys again for sticking with us. Like everything Luke said and everything we said at the beginning. And remember, we do have the live stream coming up on Friday. So definitely stick with us there. It's going to be a lot of fun. Like I said, we'll probably shoot the shit for an hour or so and just basically field questions, talk about whatever, and see what you guys want more from us here. And so I guess that is going to wrap us up. So until next time, I am Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And remember, stay scared.